One word from her lips destroyed the most dangerous man in the city and made him want her more. Adrian Vale owned everything: the clubs, the streets, the people who walked them. But when Lena Hart looked him dead in the eye and said no, his empire cracked. What happens when a woman who refuses to bow meets a man who's never heard that word? When threats turn deadly and his past comes hunting, he'll face an impossible choice: protect her his way and lose her forever, or become someone new. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The bass hit like a heartbeat gone wrong, too fast, too loud, vibrating through the soles of expensive shoes and up into rib cages already tight with anticipation. The Sapphire Den wasn't just a nightclub, it was a statement. Velvet ropes that decided who mattered, bottles that cost more than rent. And in the VIP section, behind one-way glass that turned the crowd below into a living, breathing organism of want, sat the man who owned it all. Adrian Vale didn't look like a monster. That was the problem. He looked like old money wearing new clothes, sharp jaw, dark hair pushed back just enough to seem careless, eyes that caught the neon and held it. 28 and already untouchable. The kind of man mothers warned their daughters about, and fathers pretended not to fear. He leaned back in the leather booth, one arm stretched along the backrest, a tumbler of whiskey in his other hand. Around him, his crew laughed at jokes that weren't funny, agreed with opinions they didn't hold, existed in the orbit of his approval. That's what power looked like up close. Not violence, though Adrian had plenty of that in his past, but the gravity that bent everyone else's path toward you. Everyone except her. Adrian saw her through the glass first, standing near the main bar, alone, but not lonely, turning down the third guy in 10 minutes with a shake of her head that somehow conveyed both politeness and finality. She wore black. Simple dress, nothing flashy, but it fit her like it understood what curves meant. Dark hair fell past her shoulders, and even from this distance, even through tinted glass, he could see she didn't give a damn about the spectacle around her. "Who's that?" he asked, cutting through whatever Marcus was saying about the shipment from Baltimore. Marcus, his right hand for the past 5 years, followed his gaze. "No idea. First time I've seen her." "Find out." "Boss?" "Find out." Marcus sighed and pulled out his phone, making the call. Adrian kept watching. The woman, whoever she was, had turned slightly, giving him a better angle. Late 20s, maybe. Something about the way she held herself, straight-backed but not stiff, present but not performing. She wasn't here to be seen. She was here because she wanted to be, and the distinction mattered. "Name's Lena Hart," Marcus said, phone still pressed to his ear. "Works at Morrison Memorial, ICU nurse. Came with a group for someone's birthday, but they left an hour ago. She stayed." A nurse. Adrian felt something shift in his chest. Not quite interest, not quite curiosity, something sharper. "Tell Carlos to comp her tab." "Already done." "And already sent the bottle." Adrian glanced at Marcus, who shrugged. "You get predictable when you're interested." Down below, Adrian watched as a server approached Lena with a bottle of top-shelf vodka, gesturing up toward the VIP section. He expected the usual: a smile, a wave, maybe a grateful nod. What he got instead was Lena shaking her head, the server's confusion, then a more insistent gesture toward the booth. Lena looked up. Even through the tinted glass, her eyes found his, held them. And then she turned back to the bar and went back to her drink. She'd refused him. Marcus let out a low whistle. "Well, that's new." Adrian set down his glass. "I'm going down." "That's a bad idea." "When have I ever had good ones?" The crowd parted without being asked. That's what happened when you owned the ground people stood on. They moved. Adrian descended the stairs from the VIP level, each step measured, aware of eyes tracking him but not caring. He'd built this empire on being underestimated, on looking like the rich boy playing gangster until the bodies started dropping and people realized he wasn't playing at all. But Lena Hart wasn't watching him approach. She was watching the bartender make her drink, something clear with lime, and when Adrian slid into the space beside her, she didn't even flinch. "The bottle was a gift," he said, skipping past introductions because men like him didn't need them. "I don't accept gifts from strangers." Her voice matched everything else about her, clear, direct, without the musical lilt women usually adopted when they wanted something from him. "Adrian Vale." He offered his hand. She looked at it, then back at her drink. Still a stranger? The bartender had frozen mid-pour somewhere down the bar, watching this interaction like it was a car crash in slow motion. Adrian felt something unfamiliar crawl up his spine. Irritation? No, that would have been easier. This was closer to intrigue. Most people say yes, he said. I'm not most people. Lena took a sip of her drink, ice clinking against glass. And most people probably need something from you. You don't? I don't even know you. Adrian leaned against the bar, angling himself so he could see her face better. Up close, she was even more striking, not in the magazine cover way, but in the way that suggested she'd earned every line around her eyes, every weathered softness in her expression. This was someone who'd seen things, done things, survived things. Then get to know me, he said. Why would I want to do that? The question hung between them, simple and devastating. Why would she? He was offering access to a world most people killed for, literally in some cases, and she was asking why it mattered. Adrian found himself without an answer that didn't sound like what it was. Ego. Because I'm interesting, he tried. So is a car accident. Doesn't mean I want to be in one. Someone laughed, one of the regulars at the end of the bar, who didn't know better. Adrian's eyes flicked that direction just for a second, and the laughter died. But when he looked back at Lena, she was already watching him, and he could see the exact moment she cataloged that interaction, filed it away, drew her own conclusions. You're used to people being afraid of you, she said. It wasn't a question. People respect what they fear. No, they obey what they fear. Respect is something different. Lena finished her drink and set the glass down with a deliberate click. Thanks for the offer, Adrian Vale, but I'm good. She moved to leave, and Adrian did something he hadn't done in years. He panicked. Wait. She paused. Didn't turn around, just paused. Have dinner with me. No. The word landed like a physical thing. Adrian felt it in his chest, sharp and unfamiliar. Around them, the club had gone quiet in that way loud places do when something important is happening, everyone pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. Why not? He asked, and hated how genuine the question sounded. Lena turned then, and there was something almost pitying in her expression. Because you don't want to have dinner with me. You want to win, and I'm not a game. She left. Adrian stood at the bar, surrounded by his empire, and watched her walk out the front door into the night. Behind him, he could feel his crew waiting, uncertain how to react. Marcus appeared at his elbow. Want me to... No! Adrian's voice came out harder than he intended. Leave her alone. Boss, if she disrespected... She didn't disrespect anything. Adrian turned away from the door, from the space where Lena Hart had been. She was honest, and apparently that's a rare enough commodity that I don't know what to do with it. He went back upstairs, back to the booth, back to the whiskey that suddenly tasted like regret. But for the rest of the night, he couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd looked at him. Not with fear, not with desire, but with clarity. Like she'd seen exactly who he was and decided he wasn't worth the trouble. Adrian Vale had built an empire on being worth people's trouble, and for the first time in his adult life, he had no idea how to make someone see his value. Well, 3 days passed. Adrian told himself he'd forgotten about her, told himself it was a momentary fascination, the novelty of rejection from someone who didn't know better. He had work to do, actual work, the kind that required meetings in back rooms and conversations that ended with handshakes and unspoken threats. The kind that kept the money flowing and the competition convinced that crossing him was suicide. But on the 4th day, he found himself outside Morrison Memorial Hospital at 7 a.m., parked in a black Mercedes that cost more than most people's houses, drinking coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He watched the ICU nurse's entrance, watched people in scrubs filter in and out, exhausted and caffeinated and carrying the weight of other people's worst days. And then, at 7:47, Lena Hart emerged. She looked tired, hair pulled back in a ponytail, face bare of makeup, wearing joggers and a Morrison Memorial hoodie that had seen better days. She walked to her car, a Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper, and Adrian watched her sit there for a full minute before starting the engine, like she needed to gather herself before facing whatever came next. He followed her, not close enough to spook her, but close enough to see where she went. A coffee shop first, local place, not a chain, where she ordered something complicated and sat in her car drinking it while scrolling through her phone. Then to a grocery store where she bought ingredients that suggested someone who cooked real meals. Then home to a modest apartment complex on the east side that had seen better decades but still maintained a kind of dignity. Adrian sat in his car across the street and wondered what the hell he was doing. This was stalking. He knew that. Knew it was wrong in ways that had nothing to do with legality and everything to do with the basic human contract of not being a creep. But he also couldn't shake the feeling that Lena Hart had opened a door he didn't know existed, and now he needed to understand what was on the other side. His phone buzzed. "Marcus, where are you?" "Busy. We've got the meeting with the Russians at noon." Adrian had forgotten. The Russians, specifically Dmitry Volkov and his crew out of Brighton Beach, wanted to expand their territory, and Adrian's territory was the logical next step. This meeting was supposed to establish boundaries, make it clear that expansion in his direction would be expensive in ways that had nothing to do with money. "Reschedule, boss, we can't just reschedule or I'll do it myself. And you know how I am with diplomacy." The dots appeared and disappeared 3 times before Marcus responded. "This is about the nurse, isn't it?" Adrian didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. "You're going to get yourself killed over a woman who doesn't even like you. She doesn't know me well enough to not like me yet. That's not the defense you think it is." Adrian pocketed his phone and looked back at Lena's apartment. She was on the 3rd floor, corner unit. He could see her moving past the window, putting away groceries probably, living her life completely unaware that the most dangerous man in the city was parked outside like a lovesick teenager. He gave himself until she closed the blinds. Then he left. Ticked. The calls started on day 7. Adrian had made a decision. He would approach her properly, not in a club, not from a position of power, but as a person, someone worthy of her time. The problem was he had no idea how to do that. His entire adult life had been built on leverage, what he could offer, what he could take away, the implicit understanding that saying no to him came with consequences. But Lena had said no, and nothing had happened to her. And somehow, that made him want her more. He started by having flowers delivered to her apartment. Not roses. Too obvious. Peonies because he'd called a florist and described her, and the florist had said peonies. The card read, "I'd like to try again. Adrian." The flowers came back the next day with a note. "No thank you." He tried a different approach. Had a coffee and pastry delivered to the hospital with her name on it. The delivery guy reported that she'd accepted it, which felt like progress until he got a call from an unknown number that afternoon. "Stop sending me things," Lena's voice, clinical and cool. "It's coffee," Adrian said, "not a marriage proposal. It's an attempt to buy something I'm not selling. I'm not trying to buy anything. I'm trying to apologize." Silence on the other end. Then, "For what?" "For approaching you like you were something I could acquire, for sending you a bottle like you were supposed to be grateful. For..." He paused, surprised by his own honesty. "For acting like everyone else who's ever wanted something from you, instead of wanting to know you." More silence. Adrian waited, phone pressed to his ear, aware that he was in a meeting he'd rescheduled twice already and everyone was staring at him. "One coffee," Lena finally said, public play. "Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., the cafe on Sullivan Street. And if you're late or if you bring your entourage, I walk." "I'll be there." She hung up without saying goodbye. Adrian looked at the 6 men seated around the conference table. Marcus, his accountant David, his lawyer Richard, and 3 lieutenants who controlled different sectors of his operation. They were all carefully not reacting to the fact that their boss had just gotten schooled by someone on the phone. "Where were we?" Adrian asked. "The Volkov situation," Marcus said. "They're getting aggressive about the docks." "Let them posture. They won't move without testing us first." Adrian pulled out his phone and opened his calendar. "Clear my morning tomorrow." "Boss, you've got..." "Clear it." Marcus exchanged a look with David, who shrugged. "He's going to do what he wants anyway." "That's true," Adrian agreed, "but I appreciate the illusion of input." The meeting continued, but Adrian's mind was already somewhere else. Tomorrow morning, coffee. A chance to prove he was more than what she'd assumed. He spent the rest of the day thinking about what that might look like, who that person might be. And for the first time in years, Adrian Vale felt something that wasn't control. He felt nervous. The cafe on Sullivan Street was the kind of place that existed in every city, local institution, known for strong coffee and stronger opinions, filled with regulars who treated their corner tables like property rights. Adrian arrived at 7:45, deliberately early, dressed in jeans and a sweater instead of his usual tailored suits. He wanted to look approachable, human. Lena arrived at exactly 8 o'clock. She wore scrubs again, purple this time, and carried a bag that suggested she was heading to work after this. She spotted him immediately, and he watched her pause just for a second, like she was giving herself one last chance to turn around. But she didn't. "You're early," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Didn't want you to think I wasn't serious." "I haven't decided if you being serious is a good thing or a bad thing yet." A waitress appeared. Older woman, name tag that said Deb, the kind of person who'd seen everything and remained unimpressed by all of it. "What can I get you, honey? Coffee, black, and a blueberry muffin?" Lena didn't even look at the menu. "Same," Adrian said. Deb left, and silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable exactly, but weighted. Adrian had prepared things to say, questions to ask, but now that Lena was actually here, everything felt inadequate. "You look tired," he finally said. 12-hour shift, I see you. 3 codes, 1 didn't make it. So yeah, I'm tired." Lena met his eyes. "This is my life. Coffee at 8 a.m. after watching someone die at 6. Apartment that needs new carpet. Car that makes a sound I can't afford to investigate. This is what you're trying to get to know." "I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're a man who owns nightclubs and drives cars that cost 6 figures and has people who move when you snap your fingers. We don't live in the same world. Maybe I want to understand yours." "Why?" The question again. Direct, unflinching. Adrian leaned back in his chair and decided to give her the truth. "Because you looked at me and saw someone who wasn't worth your time, and instead of getting angry, I got curious. Because everyone else in my life wants something, money, protection, access, and you walked away from all of it because you said no, and I can't remember the last time someone did that and meant it." Lena studied him, and Adrian felt exposed in a way he hadn't felt since he was 17 and watching his father get arrested, knowing everything was about to change. "You know what I think?" Lena said. "I think you're used to being the most interesting person in the room, and I threatened that by not caring. And now you're here because you need to prove to yourself that you can still win." "Maybe," Adrian admitted. "Or maybe I'm here because you're the first person in years to treat me like I'm not a monster, and I want to know what that feels like." Deb returned with coffee and muffins. They ate in silence for a while, and Adrian watched Lena methodically work through her muffin, efficient but not rushed. Someone used to taking moments where she could find them. "I looked you up," she finally said. Adrian's stomach dropped. And you're exactly what I thought you were. Adrian Vale, suspected but never convicted of racketeering, money laundering, and about 6 other things that end with jail time. Your father went to prison when you were 17. You took over his organization and apparently did it better than he ever did. The Sapphire Den is just the legitimate face of something much darker. And you still came. I'm trying to figure out why." Lena sipped her coffee. "My brain says you're dangerous and I should run. But there's this other part, the part that spent 10 years watching people die and learning that everyone's got something broken inside them. And that part is curious about what broke you." "What makes you think something broke me?" "Because people don't build empires on anger alone. There's always fear underneath. Fear of being vulnerable, of being forgotten, of ending up like whoever hurt them first." Lena set down her cup. "So what was it? What are you running from?" Adrian could have lied, should have lied, but something about the way she asked, clinical but not cold, like a nurse taking a patient history, made him want to answer honestly. "My father was a good man who made bad choices. He believed loyalty meant everything, that if you took care of people, they'd take care of you. But loyalty doesn't mean anything when the cops are offering deals and everyone's trying to save themselves. He went to prison trusting the wrong people, and I watched him die there 3 years later because the men he'd protected didn't protect him back. So you learn not to trust anyone. I learned that power is the only thing people respect, that fear keeps you safer than love ever will, that if you're going to build something, you build it on foundations that can't be taken away by someone else's weakness." "That sounds lonely." "It is." Adrian hadn't meant to say that out loud, but once it was out there, he couldn't take it back. But lonely is safer than betrayed. Lena was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry about your father. Don't be. He made his choices. Still, it's hard, losing a parent, even when they're complicated. Adrian realized he wanted to know her story too. Your parents? Mom died when I was 15. Cancer, dad's still around, remarried, lives in Florida. We talk on birthdays. Lena shrugged. Nothing dramatic, just life. And you became a nurse because watching my mom die taught me that the people who show up in those moments matter more than anything else. Doctors save lives, sure, but nurses hold hands. We're there at 3 a.m. when the fear hits. We're there when families are making impossible decisions. We're there for the parts that don't make the highlight reel. She paused. I wanted to be someone who shows up. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest. This woman, who spent her days holding space for other people's worst moments, had looked at him and decided he wasn't worth the risk. And she was right to think that. He wasn't safe. He wasn't good. He was exactly what she'd Googled, a criminal who'd learned that power was the only currency that mattered. But sitting across from her, watching her be honest in a way that had nothing to do with strategy or manipulation, Adrian wanted to be someone different, someone who deserved this, her. I need to tell you something, he said. I already know what you are. No, I mean, he stopped, trying to find words that didn't sound like an excuse. I want to say I'm not that person anymore, that I've changed, but I haven't. I'm still the man who built an empire on fear, still the person who solves problems in ways that would horrify you. But I want you to know that I hear you, that I understand why you said no. And if you give me a chance to know you, I'll do my best not to be the worst version of myself. Lena looked at him for a long time. Then she checked her watch. I have to get to work. She stood, gathering her bag. Can I see you again? The question came out more desperate than Adrian intended. I don't know. Lena pulled out a $10 bill and put it on the table. Please? She paused at the door. You want to see me again? Show me you can exist in my world without trying to control it. No gifts, no grand gestures, no using your power to make things happen. Just be a person. I can do that. We'll see. And then she was gone, disappearing into the morning rush, leaving Adrian sitting in a cafe with cold coffee and the strange sensation that something fundamental had shifted. He'd built his entire life on control, and Lena Hart was asking him to let go of it. Adrian pulled out his phone and called Marcus. How'd it go? She told me to be a person. Do you know how to do that? No, Adrian admitted. But I'm going to learn. But learning turned out to be harder than expected. Adrian spent the next week trying to figure out how normal people courted someone. He couldn't ask his crew. They'd either laugh or suggest things that definitely wouldn't work on a woman who'd already made it clear she wasn't impressed by money or power. He couldn't ask his lawyer, who'd already told him 3 times that pursuing someone after they'd said no was legally and morally questionable, boss. So he did something he hadn't done in years. He researched. He read articles about dating, watched YouTube videos about emotional intelligence, downloaded apps that were supposed to help him understand what women wanted, only to delete them when he realized they were all variations of be rich and attractive, which he already was and which hadn't worked. What Lena wanted was something else, something he didn't have a framework for. On day 4 of his Be a Person campaign, Adrian found himself doing something he never did. Walking. Just walking, no destination, through neighborhoods he owned but never visited. He watched people living their lives, buying groceries, arguing with their kids, sitting on stoops, drinking beer and complaining about work. Normal things. Human things. He walked past Morrison Memorial and stood across the street, watching the ICU windows. Somewhere up there, Lena was working, holding someone's hand probably, being the person who showed up. And Adrian realized he'd spent his entire adult life making sure he was the person people feared showing up. His phone rang. Unknown number. Yeah? It's Lena. Adrian's heart did something complicated. Hi. I have a question. Okay. Do you know how to change a tire? What? A tire? On a car. Do you know how to change one? Yes? I mean, theoretically. I've never actually done it, but I understand the concept. My car's got a flat in the hospital parking lot, and I don't have money for a tow truck until payday, and AAA says it'll be 3 hours. If you want to see me again, you can help me change a tire. No entourage, no sending someone else to do it. You. Adrian was already moving. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Parking garage, level 3. She hung up. Adrian ran the 6 blocks back to where he'd parked his car, drove to the hospital faster than was legal or smart, and arrived to find Lena standing next to her Honda Civic, looking exhausted and frustrated. She'd changed out of scrubs into jeans and a sweater, and there was a coffee stain on her left sleeve that suggested her day had been long. "You came," she said. "You called." Adrian looked at the tire, which was indeed flat. "Where's the spare?" "Trunk." They worked in silence, Adrian figuring out the jack, while Lena held the flashlight because the parking garage lighting was terrible. He'd ruined his sweater within 5 minutes, gotten grease on his jeans, and discovered that changing a tire was significantly harder than YouTube had made it look. "You really haven't done this before," Lena observed. "I usually have people for this." "I noticed." But she didn't sound judgmental, just amused. Adrian got the old tire off and the spare on, though it took him twice as long as it should have. By the time he finished, his hands were filthy, his back hurt, and he'd said several creative combinations of curse words that made Lena laugh. Actually laugh, not the polite chuckle people gave him out of obligation. "Thank you," she said when he lowered the jack. "You're welcome." Adrian stood, wiping his hands on his ruined jeans. "Though I think I failed the test, that was ugly. You showed up and you did it yourself. That's what mattered." They stood in the parking garage surrounded by the smell of oil and concrete, and Adrian felt more accomplished than he had closing $1 million deal. "I should go," Lena said. "It's late." "Can I?" Adrian stopped himself. "Be a person," she'd said. Normal people didn't push. "Text me when you get home, so I know you made it on the spare, okay?" Lena pulled out her phone. "Give me your number." He did, and she sent him a text. "It's Lena." His phone buzzed, and he saved the contact, trying not to think about the fact that this was the first time someone had his personal number who didn't work for him or fear him. "I'll text you," she said. "Okay." She got in her car, and Adrian watched her drive away on the spare tire, hoping it held. Then he stood in the parking garage alone, looking at his greasy hands and ruined clothes, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt useful, not powerful, not feared. Useful. Like he'd actually helped someone who needed it, not because they owed him or worked for him, but because they'd asked and he'd shown up. His phone buzzed. Home safe. The spare held. "Thank you again." Adrian typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, "Anytime. I mean it. Anytime you need something, call me." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared twice. Then, "That's a dangerous thing to offer someone like me. Someone like you? Someone who might actually take you up on it." Adrian smiled at his phone like an idiot. Good. He drove home, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, didn't think about the empire, the competition, the constant chess game of staying on top. He thought about the way Lena had laughed when he'd cursed at the lug nuts, the way she'd held the flashlight steady without commenting on how long it was taking, the way she'd said thank you like she meant it. He fell asleep that night thinking maybe, just maybe, he could learn to be the person she might want. But empires didn't stop because their owners were distracted by feelings. And the clock was already counting down to the moment when Adrian's world would come for Lena Hart, and all his good intentions wouldn't mean a damn thing. The text started small. Good morning messages. Lena sending him a photo of terrible hospital coffee with the caption, "Still better than your taste in whiskey." Adrian responding with a picture of his ruined jeans, still unwashed, with keeping them as evidence I can do manual labor. It felt normal, easy, like maybe this could work. Then the flowers died. Not the ones he'd sent. Those had been returned weeks ago. These were the ones in Lena's hospital locker, the cheap bodega roses her coworker Maria had brought for her birthday. Lena texted him a photo of them wilted and brown with a sad face emoji, and Adrian found himself at a flower shop at 6 a.m. the next morning, asking questions he'd never thought to ask. "What lasts longest?" he asked the florist, an elderly Korean woman who looked at him like she could see straight through his expensive watch to the truth underneath. "For what purpose?" Someone who works long shifts, 12, 14 hours, something that won't die on her. The woman considered this. Orchids. They're resilient, don't need much water, handle neglect better than most relationships. She paused. This is for the nurse you've been asking about? Adrian froze. How did you think you're the first man who comes in here at 6 a.m. looking lost? I see the same thing every time. Man meets woman who doesn't need him. Man doesn't know what to do with that. She pulled out a white orchid, elegant and simple. This will last months if she doesn't overwater it. Put it somewhere with indirect light. Tell her it doesn't need much, just consistency. Adrian bought the orchid in a card that took him 20 minutes to write. For your locker. The florist says it's harder to kill than most relationships. Seemed fitting. He had it delivered to the hospital, to the ICU nurses' station, and spent the rest of the day wondering if it was too much, too little, too something. Lena called him that night. The orchid is beautiful. You haven't killed it yet? It's been 6 hours, Adrian. I'm not that bad at keeping things alive. She paused. Though my track record with relationships isn't great. Neither is mine. Somehow, I don't think we're talking about the same kind of failures. Adrian was in his office, paperwork spread across his desk. Legitimate business mixed with the kind that would never see an audit. Marcus sat across from him, pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. Probably not, Adrian admitted. Most of my relationships end when people realize I'm not going to change for them. What if someone wasn't asking you to change? Lena's voice was quiet. What if they just wanted you to be honest? That might be worse. Why? Because honest meant showing her the parts he'd spent years burying, the violence he was capable of, the decisions he made that kept him up at night, the empire built on fear that he told himself was necessary but knew, deep down, was just safer than being vulnerable. Because I'm not sure you'd like what honest looks like, Adrian finally said. Try me. Marcus raised his eyebrows, and Adrian waved him out of the office. His second-in-command left, closing the door with exaggerated care, and Adrian was alone with Lena's voice on the other end of the line. I'm not a good person, Lena. I know what you do. I Googled you. Remember? No, I mean, knowing about it and seeing it are different things. I make decisions that hurt people. I've done things I can't take back, and the worst part is, I'd probably do them again because in my world, hesitation gets you killed. Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to be honest. Silence on the other end, and Adrian closed his eyes, waiting for the click of disconnection. Instead, Lena sighed. When I was in nursing school, they taught us about moral injury. It's what happens when you participate in or witness something that violates your core beliefs, but you do it anyway because the situation demands it. Soldiers get it, first responders, healthcare workers. We make decisions that haunt us, but in the moment, they're the only decisions we can make. That's not the same thing, isn't it? You grew up watching your father get destroyed by trusting the wrong people. You learned that power was survival. Maybe your choices are different from mine, but we're all just trying to survive our own particular kind of war. Adrian opened his eyes. You're comparing me to a nurse? I'm saying that people are complicated, and I learned a long time ago that judging them doesn't help anyone. You've been honest with me about who you are. That's more than most people manage. So what now? Now you take me to dinner, somewhere you like, not somewhere you think I'll be impressed by. I want to see your world, not the version you think I want to see. Adrian thought about his world. The restaurants where chefs knew him by name and cleared the best tables without being asked. The clubs where velvet ropes disappeared at his approach. The back rooms where deals got made and consequences got decided. That's a bad idea, he said. Probably, but I'm tired of safe choices. They haven't gotten me anywhere interesting. Friday night? I work until 8. Pick me up at my place at 9? I'll be there. After she hung up, Adrian sat in his office staring at nothing. Marcus knocked and came back in without waiting for permission. She's either the bravest woman I've ever heard of or the craziest, Marcus said. Maybe both. You know this can't end well. I know. And you're doing it anyway. Adrian looked at his oldest friend, the man who'd stood beside him through every bad decision and worst consequence for the past decade. When's the last time you saw me actually want something, Marcus? Not need, not strategize, for want. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Your 18th birthday. You wanted your dad to come home. And that worked out great, which is my point. Wanting things makes you vulnerable. Vulnerable gets you hurt, and you being hurt gets a lot of other people hurt. Marcus leaned forward. I'm not saying don't see her. I'm saying think about what happens when your world touches hers. Because it will. It always does. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're playing house while the Russians are getting bold, and the shipment from Baltimore is 2 days late, and Volkov's people have been asking questions about property we own on the docks. Adrian felt the weight of his empire settle back onto his shoulders. He'd been so focused on Lena that he'd let other things slip, and in his world, slipping got you buried. Set up the meeting with Volkov, tomorrow night. What about tomorrow night, Marcus? We'll handle it the way we always do. Adrian stood, gathering the paperwork on his desk. And when it's done, I'm taking Friday night off. The Empire can survive one night without me. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but he'd known Adrian long enough to recognize when pushing would only make things worse. Fine, but if this goes sideways, it won't. You don't know that. No, Adrian admitted, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway. The meeting with Dmitry Volkov took place in a warehouse on the waterfront, neutral territory that belonged to neither organization. Adrian brought Marcus and 3 others, enough to show strength without screaming paranoia. Volkov brought the same, plus his nephew, Alexei, who had a reputation for being smart and ruthless in equal measure. They met in the center of the empty space, surrounded by shadows and the smell of salt water and old fish. Adrian Vale. Volkov's accent was thick, but his English was perfect. He was 50-something, built like he'd done manual labor before he'd done criminal labor, with scars that suggested he'd survived things most people didn't. You've been avoiding me. I've been busy. Too busy to discuss business? That's not like you. Adrian kept his face neutral. What business did you want to discuss? The docks. Specifically the 3 warehouses you control on Pier 19. I'd like to purchase them. They're not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price. Not to you. Volkov smiled, and it wasn't friendly. You know, I respected your father. He understood that this city is big enough for everyone to eat, but you act like you own the entire table. I own what I earned. And I'm trying to earn my peace. Those warehouses would be very useful for my import business. Import business. That's what they were calling it now. Adrian knew exactly what Volkov wanted to import. Drugs, weapons, people, all the things that made money and destroyed lives in equal measure. Find other warehouses. There are no other warehouses with that kind of access. You know that, which is why I'm willing to be generous. Volkov pulled out a folded paper from his jacket. 3 million, cash, for all 3. Adrian didn't look at the paper. No. You haven't even seen the offer. I don't need to. The answer's no. Alexei stepped forward, and Adrian's crew tensed. Marcus's hand moved subtly toward his waistband, where Adrian knew he kept a .45 that had seen more use than anyone wanted to talk about. Perhaps you should reconsider, Alexei said. His English was cleaner than his uncle's. American-educated, probably. In business, flexibility is important. So is knowing when to walk away, Adrian replied. Is that a threat? It's advice. The kind your uncle would have appreciated in his position. Volkov held up a hand, stopping Alexei from whatever he was about to say. You're making a mistake, Adrian. I came here in good faith, offering fair price for property you don't even use. I use it enough to know I don't want you having it. Because you don't trust me. Because I don't trust anyone. Adrian met Volkov's eyes. My father trusted people, and it got him killed in a prison cell. I learned from that mistake. Your father was weak, Volkov said, and the warehouse went silent. Adrian felt Marcus tense beside him, felt his own crew ready to move, felt the moment balance on a knife's edge between negotiation and violence. My father, Adrian said carefully, was loyal to people who didn't deserve it. That's not weakness. That's poor judgment. And unlike him, I've learned to tell the difference. So your answer is no. My answer is no. Volkov studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Then we have nothing more to discuss. But think about this, Adrian. You can't hold everything forever. Eventually, you'll have to let something go. I'll let you know when that happens. They left, Volkov and his crew disappearing into the night, and Adrian stood in the empty warehouse, feeling like he'd just dodged a bullet that hadn't been fired yet. "That went well," Marcus said, voice heavy with sarcasm. "Could have been worse. Could have been better. He's not going to let this go. I know. And when he pushes back, it's going to get messy. I know that too." Adrian pulled out his phone and checked the time. Almost midnight. Lena would be asleep by now, up again in 6 hours for another shift, holding other people's pain. "But we've handled worse. Have we? Because I remember the last time someone pushed this hard, we ended up burning down their warehouse and putting 3 of their crew in the hospital. Different situation. Is it? Or are you just distracted by a woman and making bad calls?" Adrian turned to face Marcus. "You think I should have taken the deal. I think you should have at least pretended to consider it. Give yourself room to negotiate, make him feel heard, find a compromise that doesn't end with bodies in the river." There is no compromise. He gets those warehouses, he controls half the waterfront. That's not compromise, that's surrender. And if he decides to take them anyway, then we'll do what we always do. Marcus shook his head. "You're different lately. Ever since that night at the club. Ever since her." "Different how?" "Softer. Like you're trying to be someone you're not." Marcus paused. "I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's dangerous. People are watching. They're wondering if you've lost your edge, and the second they think you have, they'll test you." "Let them test." "Adrian, let them test, Marcus, because I'm still the same person I was a month ago. I still make the hard calls. I still protect what's mine. The only difference is now I'm trying to be someone worth knowing instead of just someone worth fearing. And if you can't be both..." Adrian didn't have an answer for that. They drove back in silence, and Adrian spent the ride thinking about the look in Volkov's eyes when he'd called his father weak, the way Alexei had stepped forward, ready to escalate, the implicit threat hanging in the air like smoke. His phone buzzed. A text from Lena. "Can't sleep. Thinking about a patient we lost today. He was only 43. 3 kids. Just makes you wonder what the point of any of it is." Adrian stared at the message, at this window into a world where death meant something more than strategy, where loss was personal instead of collateral. He typed back, "The point is, you were there, you showed up. That's more than most people can say. Thanks, that helps. Sort of. Want to talk about it?" "No. But I want to hear about your day. Something normal. Something that isn't death." Adrian looked at Marcus, at the streets passing by, at the empire he'd built that was anything but normal. "Had a business meeting. Guy wanted to buy some property. I said no. He didn't like it. Sounds tense, it was, but I stood my ground." "Good. Sometimes standing your ground is all you can do." Adrian smiled at his phone. "When did you get so wise? 10 years of watching people die teaches you that everything else is just noise. The only things that matter are whether you showed up and whether you were honest. See you Friday? Counting on it." He put his phone away and watched the city pass by, neon lights reflecting off rain-slicked streets, and wondered if it was possible to stand his ground in both worlds, Lena's and his own. If he could be the man who changed tires and sent orchids, while also being the man who told Dmitry Volkov to go to hell and meant it. Marcus pulled up outside Adrian's building, a high-rise that overlooked the river and cost more per month than most people made in a year. "You're in over your head," Marcus said. "Probably. And you're going to keep going anyway. Definitely. Then at least be careful, because the people who want to hurt you know the easiest way to do it now." Adrian got out of the car and looked back at his oldest friend. "I'm not going to let anything happen to her. That's not a promise you can keep. Watch me." He went upstairs to his apartment, all glass and steel and expensive furniture that a decorator had chosen because Adrian didn't care enough to have opinions about interior design. He poured himself a drink and stood at the window looking out over the city he controlled, thinking about a woman who controlled nothing except her own choices and somehow had more power than his entire empire. Friday came slower than Adrian wanted and faster than he was ready for. He spent the days between handling business, checking in on operations, making sure the shipment from Baltimore finally arrived, putting out fires that seemed to spark up everywhere he wasn't looking. The Russians were quiet, which worried him more than noise would have. Volkov wasn't the type to accept no and walk away. He was planning something, and Adrian couldn't figure out what. But Friday night, he pushed it all aside. He picked up Lena at exactly 9, driving himself instead of having Marcus or a driver, wearing jeans and a button-down instead of a suit. When she came downstairs, she was wearing a green dress that hit just above her knees and heels that made her almost his height. "You look beautiful," he said, and meant it. "You look nervous," she replied, getting in the car. "Little bit." "Why? You own half the city. What's scary about dinner?" "I want you to like me." Lena looked at him, really looked, and Adrian felt exposed again. "I already like you, Adrian. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. The question is whether you like yourself enough to let me keep liking you." That's a complicated question. Most honest ones are. He took her to Marcello's, an Italian place in Little Italy that had been around since the 50s and still made pasta by hand every morning. It wasn't the fanciest restaurant in the city, but it was the best, and more importantly, it was real. The owner, Tony, was 70 and had known Adrian since he was a kid running errands for his father. "Adrian!" Tony came around the bar when they walked in, pulling him into a hug that smelled like garlic and red wine. "And who is this beautiful woman you bring to my restaurant?" "Lena Hart." "Lena, this is Tony. He taught me everything I know about pasta." "Which is not much," Tony laughed. "But he has good taste in company. Come, sit. I make you something special." They sat in a corner booth, candles flickering between them, and Tony disappeared into the kitchen before Adrian could even look at a menu. "He seems to like you," Lena said. "He knew my father. Used to let me work in the kitchen during summer when I was 14, taught me how to make carbonara." Adrian paused. "After my dad went away, Tony was one of the few people who didn't treat me different. Everyone else either pitied me or feared what I'd become, but Tony just put me to work and told me to stop feeling sorry for myself. Smart man." The smartest. Food started arriving. Antipasto, then pasta, then more pasta, then dishes Adrian couldn't even name. Tony had cooked for them like they were family, and Lena ate with the kind of appreciation that suggested she didn't get home-cooked meals often. "This is incredible," she said, around a bite of something involving mushrooms and truffle oil. "Tony doesn't mess around." "You come here a lot?" Used to. Haven't been in a while." Adrian realized it was true. He'd gotten so caught up in maintaining his empire that he'd stopped going to the places that mattered. "Got too busy, I guess." "Too busy for good pasta? That's a crime." "Probably." They ate and talked, and Adrian found himself telling her things he hadn't told anyone. About his mother, who'd left when he was 12 because she couldn't handle being married to a criminal. About his first job working for his father, delivering packages he wasn't allowed to open. About the moment he'd decided to take over the organization instead of walking away, standing in a prison visiting room, watching his father die by inches and knowing someone had to pick up the pieces. Lena listened without judging, asking questions that made him think harder about his own story. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Taking over?" "Sometimes. Late at night when I can't sleep and I'm thinking about all the things I've done. But then morning comes and I remember why I did it. Because walking away meant admitting my father died for nothing. That everything he built, all the loyalty and sacrifice, just disappeared because people were too weak to stand up. That's a lot of weight to carry." "It is." Adrian met her eyes across the table. "But I'm tired of carrying it alone." "Is that what this is? You looking for someone to share the weight?" "No, I'm looking for someone who reminds me there's more to life than weight." Lena reached across the table and took his hand, and Adrian felt something settle in his chest. They finished dinner, said goodbye to Tony, who refused payment and insisted they come back soon, and walked out into the night. "Where to now?" Lena asked. Adrian had planned to take her home, be respectful, not push. But standing there with her hand in his, the city alive around them, he made a different choice. "Want to see something?" "Depends what it is." "Trust me?" Lena studied his face, and Adrian held his breath. "Okay," she finally said. "Show me." He drove them to the waterfront, to a pier that jutted out over the water where the city lights reflected off the surface like stars. There was a bench at the end, and they sat there in the cold, watching the river flow past. "I come here sometimes," Adrian said, "when everything gets too loud and I need to remember why I'm doing any of it." "And why are you doing it?" "Because this city, for all its problems, all its darkness, it's mine. I grew up here, learned to fight here, built something here, and I know that what I built isn't good, isn't noble, but it's real, it exists, And that matters. Lena leaned against his shoulder. You talk about it like it's a burden you chose. Isn't it? I don't know, maybe, but I think you also love it. The power, the control, the empire. You wouldn't have built it if you didn't. Adrian thought about that. Maybe I loved what it gave me. Safety, respect, the ability to make sure what happened to my father never happened to me. And now? Now I'm starting to think there might be other things worth having. They sat in silence, and Adrian felt Lena's breathing match his own, felt the weight of everything he hadn't said pressing against his chest. I should tell you something, he said. You keep saying that. This time I mean it. Adrian turned to face her. The meeting I had this week with the guy who wanted to buy property, his name is Dmitry Volkov. He runs the Russian organization out of Brighton Beach, and he's dangerous. Not just to me, but to anyone connected to me. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you're getting into. Being seen with me puts a target on you. People who want to hurt me will look at you and see an opportunity. And I need you to understand that before this goes any further. Lena was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the water. Are you trying to scare me away again? I'm trying to be honest. Honest would be asking me what I want instead of deciding for me what I can handle. Adrian felt chastised and impressed in equal measure. What do you want? I want to keep seeing you. I want to see where this goes, and I want you to stop treating me like I'm fragile. Lena looked at him. I work in an ICU, Adrian. I've held the hands of dying gang members and overdose victims, and people who've been shot and stabbed and worse. I'm not scared of your world. I'm scared of you using it as an excuse to push me away when things get real. Things are already real. Then act like it. Adrian kissed her. Didn't ask permission, didn't second guess, just leaned in and kissed her like it was the only honest thing he knew how to do. Lena kissed him back, her hand coming up to his face, and for a moment the empire didn't matter. The Russians didn't matter. Nothing mattered except this. When they broke apart, Lena was smiling. Took you long enough, she said. Wanted to do it right. How'd you do? You tell me. She kissed him again, and Adrian felt whatever wall he'd been maintaining between them crumble completely. They stayed at the pier until the cold drove them back to the car, and Adrian drove her home knowing everything had changed. He walked her to her door and she turned before going in. This is real now, she said. You know that, right? I know. Good. Because I don't do halfway. Neither do I. She went inside and Adrian stood in the hallway for a full minute before heading back to his car. He felt lighter than he had in years, like maybe there was a version of his life that didn't end with him alone in an expensive apartment counting money and enemies. His phone rang as he got in the car. Marcus. We have a problem. The lightness evaporated. What kind of problem? The kind where someone spray-painted a threat on the warehouse on Pier 19. Russian words. Alexei's crew, probably. Adrian closed his eyes. What did it say? Translation came back as everything has a price. That's not subtle. Neither is what they did to the lock. Bolt cutters, clean job. They wanted us to know they could get in whenever they want. Adrian started the car. I'm on my way. Boss, it's late. We can handle, I'm on my way, Marcus. He drove to the warehouse, and the whole way there, he couldn't stop thinking about what Lena had said. That she wasn't scared of his world. That she wanted him to act like this was real. But real meant consequences. Real meant the Russians wouldn't stop at spray paint. Real meant Lena was now part of a game she didn't understand, and he was the one who'd pulled her into it. The warehouse looked exactly like Marcus described. Lock cut. Message spray-painted in red across the door. Adrian stood there in the cold, staring at Russian words he couldn't read but understood perfectly. What do you want to do? Marcus asked. Adrian thought about Volkov's smile, about Alexei stepping forward, about the implicit threat that had been hanging in the air since that meeting. Double the security. Cameras on every approach, and find out where Alexei drinks. Boss? Find out where he drinks, Marcus. I'm going to send a message back. That's escalation. They escalated first. And if this turns into a war? Adrian looked at his second-in-command. Then we'll fight it, same as always. But as he drove home that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that this time was different. This time, he had something to lose that wasn't just territory or money or pride. This time he had Lena. And Dmitry Volkov had just reminded him that in his world, everything you cared about could be used against you. Adrian didn't tell Lena about the warehouse. Didn't tell her about the surveillance footage showing Alexei and two others casing the property at 3 a.m. Didn't tell her about the meeting he had with his crew where they discussed responses ranging from property damage to something significantly more permanent. He told himself he was protecting her, keeping her separate from the ugliness. But 3 days later, when she texted him asking why he'd been distant, he realized he was doing exactly what she'd asked him not to do, treating her like she couldn't handle the truth. They met for coffee again, same cafe on Sullivan Street, same table. Lena looked tired, dark circles under her eyes that suggested too many shifts without enough sleep between them. She ordered her usual black coffee and blueberry muffin, and Adrian watched her add sugar to the coffee even though she claimed to drink it black. "You add sugar," he said. "What?" "The coffee. You say you drink it black, but you just added sugar." Lena looked at her cup like she hadn't realized what she was doing. Habit from residency. Started drinking it black to seem tough, started adding sugar when I realized nobody cared and I just wanted it to taste better. She took a sip. "Why do you look like you haven't slept?" "Business stuff." "The Russians?" Adrian's head snapped up. "How did you—" "You mentioned them last week, and you've been weird since Friday, distant, like you're trying to handle something alone." Lena set down her coffee. So what happened? He could lie, should lie, but her eyes were on him, patient and unwavering, and Adrian realized he was tired of carrying everything himself. "They vandalized one of my warehouses, cut the lock, spray-painted a message. Nothing major, just a reminder that they can reach my property whenever they want." "And you're planning to hit back?" It wasn't a question. Adrian nodded. "How bad?" "Nothing violent, just sending a message that I received theirs and I'm not backing down." "What kind of message?" Adrian hesitated. "Better if you don't know the details." "Why? Because I'll judge you? I already told you I know what you are, Adrian. You running a criminal empire isn't news to me. Knowing about it and being complicit in it are different things. I'm not asking to be complicit. I'm asking you to trust me enough to tell me what's happening in your life. There's a difference." Lena broke off a piece of her muffin, but didn't eat it. "You want this to be real? Then it has to go both ways. You don't get to decide what I can handle. What if I do something that makes you leave? Then I'll leave. But at least I'll leave knowing the truth instead of whatever story you decided to tell me." She met his eyes. "I'm not asking you to be perfect, Adrian. I'm asking you to be honest." So he told her. About finding Alexei's regular bar. About planning to have some of his crew pay a visit. Nothing violent, but enough to make it clear that Adrian Vale's property wasn't open for inspection. About the escalation this represented, how it could spiral into something worse if Volkov decided to push back harder. Lena listened without interrupting, her face unreadable, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Okay," she finally said. "Okay? Okay, I understand. Thank you for telling me." "That's it? No lecture about violence, not solving anything?" "Would it change what you're doing?" "No." "Then why would I waste my breath?" Lena took another sip of her coffee. "I don't have to like your choices to understand why you're making them. And I'm not naive enough to think you're going to change your entire life because we've been on a few dates. Most people would run. I'm not most people. You should have figured that out by now." Adrian felt something in his chest loosen. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not. But that's not really the question, is it? The question is whether we're good for each other, and I don't know the answer to that yet." "What would make you know?" "Time, honesty, seeing how you handle things when they get hard." Lena finished her muffin. "Right now things are easy. We're in the honeymoon phase where everything's exciting and new. But relationships aren't built on the easy parts. They're built on what happens when everything goes wrong and you still choose to show up." Pretty cynical for a romantic. Who said I was a romantic? I'm a realist who's seen enough people die to know that time is the only currency that matters. And I'd rather spend mine knowing the truth than living in a comfortable lie. Adrian reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm going to mess this up. You know that, right?" "Probably. But I'm going to mess it up too. That's how this works." Lena squeezed his hand. "Just promise me one thing." "What?" "If this thing with the Russians gets dangerous, I mean, actually dangerous, not just property damage and posturing. You'll tell me. Because I can handle a lot of things, Adrian, but I can't handle being blindsided. I promise. Good. She stood, gathering her bag. I have to get to work, double shift today. Someone called in sick. When do I see you again? Depends. When are you planning this bar thing? Tonight. Then text me when it's done. Let me know you're okay. Lena leaned down and kissed him, quick and warm. And be careful. I'm getting attached to you. That sounds dangerous. Everything worth having is. She left, and Adrian sat at the table finishing his cold coffee, thinking about what she'd said. About truth and time and choosing to show up. About being good for each other instead of just good together. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Everything's set for tonight. Alexei drinks at a place called the Red Room in Brighton Beach. We go in at 11, outnumber them 3-1, deliver the message, and get out clean. Adrian stared at the text. This was the moment where he could back out, find another way, be the person Lena thought he might become. But Volkov had made the first move, and in Adrian's world, not responding was the same as weakness. And weakness got you killed. I'll be there. Keep it clean. No weapons. No hospital visits. Just a conversation. You sure about that? Marcus. Fine. Clean. Got it. Adrian spent the rest of the day trying to focus on legitimate business, reviewing contracts for the Sapphire Den, meeting with his accountant about quarterly numbers, returning calls from people who thought they mattered. But his mind kept drifting to the Red Room, to what would happen when he walked in with a dozen men at his back and told Alexei Volkov to deliver a message to his uncle. At 10:30, he met Marcus and the crew at a warehouse in Red Hook. 11 men total, all people Adrian trusted, all veterans of situations that required presence without violence. They were dressed casual but expensive, the kind of clothes that said money without screaming it. Rules are simple, Adrian told them. We walk in, we find Alexei, we have a conversation. No touching unless they start it, no weapons unless things go sideways. We're there to send a message, not start a war. And if they don't want to have a conversation? Asked Tommy, one of the younger guys who'd come up through the ranks fast because he was smart and loyal in equal measure. Then we have it anyway. But we do it respectfully. These are professionals, same as us. Treat them like it. They drove to Brighton Beach in 3 cars, parking a block away from the Red Room. The neighborhood was different here. Russian signs in windows, men in tracksuits smoking outside bodegas, music with accordion and minor keys spilling out of open doors. This was Volkov territory, and walking into it was either brave or stupid depending on how things went. The Red Room was exactly what Adrian expected. Low lighting, vinyl booze, a bar that looked like it had been there since the 70s. The music was loud enough to drown out conversation, and the air smelled like cigarettes and vodka. Every head turned when they walked in, 12 men who clearly didn't belong, and Adrian watched the bartender reach for something under the bar. Easy, Marcus said, hands visible, posture non-threatening. We're just here to talk. Alexei was in a booth at the back, surrounded by 5 of his own crew. He saw them coming and didn't stand, didn't run, just took a sip of his drink and waited. Adrian slid into the booth across from him, and Marcus stood at the end of the table, blocking anyone from getting too close. Adrian Vale. Alexei's English was perfect, no trace of accent. This is unexpected. Is it? Your people visited my warehouse a few nights ago. Thought I'd return the courtesy. We were just looking around. Public property, right? Not quite. And the message you left wasn't very neighborly. Alexei smiled, and it reminded Adrian of his uncle, polite on the surface, violence underneath. My uncle believes in clear communication. So do I, which is why I'm here to deliver a message. Adrian leaned forward. Tell Dmitri that I received his offer and my answer hasn't changed. The warehouses aren't for sale, not to him, not to anyone. He won't be happy about that. I don't need him happy. I need him to understand boundaries. Boundaries are negotiable, not mine. The bar had gone quiet, everyone watching this exchange, waiting to see if it would turn into something more. Adrian could feel his crew tensing, ready to move if Alexei's people made a wrong gesture. You know, Alexei said conversationally, my uncle actually likes you, respects what you've built, but he's wondering if maybe you're not as sharp as you used to be. Word is you've been distracted lately. Something about a woman. Adrian felt ice settle in his stomach. Excuse me? Just talk. You know how it is. People notice things. Pretty woman, works at Morrison Memorial, drives a Honda with a dent in the bumper. Alexei took another sip of his drink. Nothing threatening, just observation. We like to know what's happening in the neighborhood. You want to make this personal? Adrian's voice was quiet, dangerous. Because I can make it very personal, very fast. No threats, Adrian, just information. My uncle believes that successful men need to protect what's theirs. And sometimes, the best way to protect something is to know when to compromise. Marcus's hand moved to Adrian's shoulder, a gentle warning. This was the moment where things could go sideways, where a wrong word would turn conversation into violence. Tell your uncle, Adrian said carefully, that I appreciate his concern for my business interests, but I don't need his advice on what to protect or how to protect it. And if he's smart, he'll keep his observations about my personal life to himself. Or what? Or we'll have a different kind of conversation, the kind that doesn't happen in public. Alexei studied him, and Adrian watched the younger man calculate angles, weigh options. Finally, he nodded. I'll deliver your message. Good. Adrian stood. Enjoy your evening. They walked out of the Red Room without incident, got into their cars, and drove away. Nobody spoke until they were back in Red Hook, back in the warehouse, safe. That was close, Marcus said. Too close. Adrian pulled out his phone, checking for messages from Lena. Nothing yet. They know about her. They know she exists. That's different from knowing she matters. Is it? Because they brought her up for a reason. They're telling me they can reach her if they want to. So what do you want to do? Adrian thought about Lena's face when she'd asked him to tell her if things got dangerous, about her saying she could handle the truth but couldn't handle being blindsided. I need to tell her. Boss, that's a bad idea. You tell her the Russians are watching her, she'll either freak out and leave or do something stupid trying to prove she's not scared. Or she'll appreciate that I'm being honest and we'll figure it out together. You're putting a lot of faith in someone you've known for 3 weeks. I'm putting faith in someone who's given me every reason to trust her and no reasons not to. Adrian headed for his car. Get everyone home and double security on the warehouses. If Volkov wants to escalate, I want to know about it before it happens. He drove to Morrison Memorial, parked in the visitor lot, and texted Lena. Are you on break anytime soon? The reply came 5 minutes later. 20 minutes. Why? Everything okay? Need to talk. I'll be in the cafeteria. That sounds ominous. Just need to see you. The hospital cafeteria at midnight was a strange place, half empty, fluorescent lit, smelling like bad coffee and industrial cleaning solution. Adrian bought 2 coffees and sat at a table in the corner, watching nurses and doctors filter through in various states of exhaustion. Lena appeared wearing scrubs with cartoon characters on them. Snoopy, he realized, and looking like she'd been running. What's wrong? She asked, sliding into the chair across from him. The bar thing went fine. No violence, just a conversation. Then why are you here looking like someone died? Adrian pushed the coffee toward her. They mentioned you. Lena went very still. What? Alexei Volkov's nephew. He brought you up. Not by name, but close enough. Said they'd noticed I'd been distracted, mentioned a woman who works here and drives a Honda. They're watching me. Watching both of us, probably, trying to figure out if you're leverage they can use. Lena took a sip of coffee, and Adrian watched her process this information. He'd expected fear, maybe anger. What he got was calculation. So what does that mean? She asked. It means I need to be more careful. Keep distance between us until this situation resolves. No. Lena? No, Adrian. We're not doing that. She set down her coffee hard enough that it sloshed. I told you I'm not fragile. I told you I can handle this. And the first sign of actual danger, you want to push me away for my own protection? I'm trying to keep you safe. I work in a trauma center in a city with one of the highest violent crime rates in the country. I've been threatened by patients high on drugs. I've been grabbed by families who didn't like that we couldn't save their loved one. I've had a gun pulled on me in the parking garage. Safety is relative, and I stopped expecting it years ago. This is different. Why? Because it's your enemies instead of random violence? Lena leaned forward. Here's what I think. I think you're scared that if something happens to me, it'll be your fault. And instead of dealing with that fear, You're trying to make the decision for both of us. They could hurt you to get to me. They could. Or they could realize I'm not someone you can intimidate through proxy and move on to other tactics. She paused. I'm not saying I'm not scared. I am. But I'm more scared of you using this as an excuse to run away from something real, because real means you might actually lose something that matters. Adrian felt the truth of her words settle in his chest. She was right. He was scared. Terrified, actually, in a way he hadn't been since watching his father get sentenced. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Care about someone while also being what I am. Then we'll figure it out together. But we're not figuring it out with you making unilateral decisions about my safety. Lena reached across the table and took his hand. I need you to hear me on this. I'm choosing to be here. I'm choosing this, knowing the risks. Don't take away my choice because you're trying to protect me. What if I can't protect you? Then you can't. But at least I'll know you tried. At least I'll know you were honest. She squeezed his hand. Promise me you won't shut me out. I promise. And promise me that if the Russians escalate, if this gets worse, you'll tell me so I can make informed decisions about my own life. I promise that too. Lena stood, checking her watch. I have to get back. We've got a head trauma coming in from a car accident. Adrian stood with her. Be careful. Always am. She kissed him quickly. And Adrian, thank you for telling me. I know it wasn't easy. She left and Adrian sat back down, staring at his untouched coffee. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How'd she take it? Better than I did. She's tougher than she looks. She's tougher than anyone looks. Adrian drove home through empty streets, thinking about what Lena had said, about choice and honesty and figuring things out together. He'd spent his entire adult life making decisions alone, trusting no one, building walls that kept everyone at a safe distance. But Lena was asking him to tear down those walls. And the terrifying part was, he wanted to. The next morning, everything changed. Adrian woke to 15 missed calls from Marcus and a text that made his blood run cold. Someone broke into Lena's apartment last night. She's okay, but you need to get here now. He made it to Lena's building in 12 minutes, breaking at least 6 traffic laws. Marcus was waiting outside with 2 of their crew, and the look on his face told Adrian everything he needed to know. How bad? Adrian asked. Bad. They didn't take anything, didn't hurt anyone, just left a message. What kind of message? You need to see it yourself. They went upstairs to Lena's apartment, where a uniformed cop was taking photos and another was asking Lena questions. She sat on her couch looking pale but composed, still wearing the scrubs from last night, and when she saw Adrian, her composure cracked just slightly. He went to her immediately. Are you okay? I'm fine. I wasn't here when it happened. I was at work. My neighbor heard the noise and called the cops. The cop taking photos looked at Adrian. And you are? Friend, Adrian said. At the same time, Lena said, boyfriend. The word hung in the air between them. Official now, labeled. And despite everything, Adrian felt something warm in his chest. The cop made a note. Any idea who would want to break in? The neighbor says nothing was taken. No idea, Lena lied smoothly, and Adrian realized she understood more about his world than he'd given her credit for. After the cops left, Marcus showed Adrian the message. It was waiting in Lena's bedroom, written in red lipstick on her mirror. Everything has a price. The same message from the warehouse, but this time in Lena's private space. This time making it clear that they could reach her anywhere, anytime. Volkov, Adrian said quietly, has to be. Nobody else would be this bold. Marcus looked at Lena. You can't stay here, not until we figure this out. I'm not leaving my home because someone wants to scare me. Lena, Adrian started. No, I'm not running. I'm not hiding, and I'm definitely not letting whoever did this think they won. Her voice was steady, but Adrian could see her hands shaking. This is my life, my apartment, my things, and I refuse to give that up. Then let me have someone watch the building, Adrian said. Cameras, security, someone posted outside, please. Lena looked at him, and Adrian saw her weighing independence against pragmatism. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but nothing obvious. I don't want to feel like I'm living in a fortress. Done. Adrian turned to Marcus. Set it up. Round the clock, rotating shifts, best people we have, and find out how they got past the building security. Marcus made the calls while Adrian sat with Lena on her couch. She was holding it together, but he could see the cracks forming. "I keep thinking about them being in here," she said quietly. "Touching my things, looking through my life. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. This isn't your fault." "Yes, it is. They did this because of me. Because Volkov knows you matter, and he's testing to see how far he can push before I break." "So don't break." Lena looked at him. "Whatever you're thinking, revenge, retaliation, violence, don't. Because the second you escalate, this becomes exactly what he wants. A war where I'm caught in the middle. I can't just do nothing. I'm not asking you to do nothing. I'm asking you to be smart." She took his hand. "You said you wanted to be someone different, someone worth knowing. This is where you prove it. Not by hitting back harder, but by finding another way." Adrian thought about all the times in his life when problems had been solved with force, when being the scariest person in the room was the solution. Every instinct he had was screaming to go to Volkov's territory and burn it to the ground until the old man understood that touching Lena Hart meant death. But she was asking him to be different, better. "I don't know how to do that," he admitted. "Then learn. We'll figure it out together, remember?" Marcus came back looking grim. Building security was bypassed professionally. Someone knew what they were doing, and I checked with our contacts. Volkov's people were all accounted for last night. This wasn't them directly. "He hired someone," Adrian said. "Looks like it, which means he's serious about sending a message." Adrian stood pacing Lena's small living room, trying to think like the strategist he'd trained himself to be instead of the angry man who wanted to burn the world down. "What does Volkov actually want?" he asked. "The warehouses," Marcus said. "Control of the waterfront. Market share." "And he thinks threatening Lena will make me give that up?" "He thinks it'll make you emotional, make you sloppy. Either you'll overreact and give him justification to escalate, or you'll back down to protect her. Either way, he wins." Lena stood. "Then do neither. Don't give him what he wants, but don't give him the war he's trying to start either." "What's the third option?" Adrian asked. "I don't know yet, but there has to be one." She looked between them. "You're both smart men who've built empires on strategy. So strategize. Find a way to protect your territory without sacrificing me as collateral damage." She was right. Adrian knew she was right. But 20 years of learned behavior was hard to override, and every instinct was still screaming for blood. His phone rang. Unknown number. "Yeah?" "Adrian Vale." Dmitry Volkov's voice, thick accent, almost friendly. "I hope your woman is well. Such a terrible thing, break-ins. The city is so dangerous these days." Adrian felt Marcus tense beside him, saw Lena's eyes widen as she realized who was calling. "What do you want, Dmitry?" "To have conversation. Man to man. Tomorrow, noon, the cafe on 5th Avenue near the park. Just us. No crew, no weapons, just two businessmen discussing mutual interests. And if I say no, then we continue as we have been, and who knows what might happen next. So much danger in this city. So many ways people get hurt." A pause. "Bring the woman if you want. I would like to meet her. She seems very special to you." The line went dead. Adrian stood there holding his phone, feeling Lena watching him, knowing that whatever he decided next would determine whether he was the man she believed he could be or the man he'd always been. "What did he say?" Lena asked. "He wants to meet, tomorrow at noon. Says I can bring you if I want." "Then I'm coming." "Absolutely not." "Adrian, he just invited me. Refusing would be showing fear, and I'm not afraid of Dmitry Volkov." She crossed her arms. "Besides, you need someone there to keep you from doing something stupid." "She has a point," Marcus said. Adrian looked at his oldest friend. "You're supposed to be on my side." "I am. Which is why I'm telling you that walking into a meeting with Volkov alone and angry is a recipe for disaster. But walking in with her, that shows control, shows you're not rattled." "I'm very rattled." "Then fake it better." Marcus headed for the door. "I'll have security here within the hour. Full camera coverage, someone in a car outside, panic button installed. She'll be safer here than most places in the city." After he left, Adrian turned to Lena. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. Because this is my life now, too. And I'd rather face it head on than hide and hope it goes away." She moved closer to him. "Besides, I want to meet the man who thinks he can use me as leverage. Want him to see exactly what he's dealing with. You're terrifying, you know that? I work in trauma medicine. I've seen worse things than Dmitry Volkov. She kissed him softly. We're going to get through this. How do you know? Because the alternative is unacceptable, and I don't accept unacceptable options. Adrian held her, standing in her violated apartment, and wondered if this was what his father had felt like, knowing the woman he loved was in danger because of choices he'd made, paths he'd chosen, empires he'd built on foundations of fear and violence. But his father had backed down, had compromised, had trusted the wrong people and paid for it with his life. Adrian wasn't his father. Tomorrow, he would meet Dmitry Volkov. And somehow, he would find a way to protect both his empire and the woman who'd become more important than all of it, even if he had no idea how. The cafe on Fifth Avenue was the kind of place where old money pretended to be humble. White tablecloths, fresh flowers, waiters in vests who moved like ghosts. Adrian arrived 15 minutes early with Lena, scanning the room out of habit, cataloging exits and sightlines and people who might be problems. You're doing it again, Lena said quietly. Doing what? Treating this like a battlefield. It is a battlefield, just a polite one. Then try to remember we're here to talk, not fight. She wore a simple black dress and flats, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She looked like exactly what she was, a working professional who didn't have time for games. Adrian had suggested she dress differently, something that screamed power or wealth, but she'd refused. I'm not performing for Dmitry Volkov, she'd said that morning. He gets the real me, same as you did. Now, watching her settle into her chair with the kind of calm he envied, Adrian wondered if bringing her had been brilliant or catastrophic. Dmitry Volkov arrived exactly at noon. He was smaller than Adrian expected, maybe 5'9", but built solid like a man who'd done real work before graduating to ordering other people to do it. Late 50s, gray hair cropped military short, wearing a suit that was expensive but not flashy. Alexei followed 2 steps behind, and Adrian noticed the younger man's eyes go to Lena immediately, assessing. Adrian Vale. Volkov's handshake was firm, his smile almost genuine. And you must be the famous Lena Hart. Not famous, Lena said, shaking his hand without hesitation. Just regular. But regular people don't usually end up in the middle of business like ours. Volkov sat across from them, Alexei taking the chair beside him. I appreciate you both coming. You didn't leave much choice, Adrian said. There is always choice. You could have said no, could have sent message back, could have done many things. But you came. That tells me you are a reasonable man. Or it tells you I wanted to look you in the eye when I told you to stay away from her. Volkov's smile didn't waver. Direct. I like this. So let me be direct too. He gestured to the waiter, ordered coffee in Russian-accented English, then turned back to Adrian. I want the warehouses. You know this. What you maybe don't know is why. Does it matter? It matters because I'm not trying to take your empire, Adrian. I'm trying to build my own. And those 3 warehouses represent something very specific to my operation. Access to shipping routes that don't require going through certain people who, let's say, are not friendly to Russian interests. So buy different warehouses. There are no different warehouses with that access. You know this. I know this. Which is why I'm willing to pay more than they're worth. Volkov leaned forward. 5 million. Cash. For all 3. You walk away with enough money to buy better property elsewhere. I get what I need. Everyone is happy. Adrian felt Lena's hand find his under the table, a gentle pressure that said, listen, don't react. And if I say no again, Adrian asked, then I'm forced to make business decision I don't want to make. Volkov glanced at Lena. I like you, Adrian. I respect what you've built, but I also respect leverage. And everyone has something they care about more than warehouses. You threatening her right in front of me. I'm explaining reality. In our world, the things we love become weaknesses. Your father learned this. He loved his crew too much, trusted them too much, and they betrayed him when it mattered. You're smarter. You've kept everyone at distance. Until now. Volkov's eyes settled on Lena with something like curiosity. What is it about her that made you forget the rules? That's none of your business, Adrian said, but Lena squeezed his hand again and spoke before he could continue. Can I ask you something, Mr. Volkov? The older man looked surprised, but nodded. Of course. What happens after you get the warehouses? You expand your operation, you make more money, you build your empire. Then what? Someone else comes along wanting what you have, and the whole cycle starts over. That is how business works. Oh, that's how your business works. But it doesn't have to be the only way. Lena leaned forward, and Adrian watched her shift into the mode he'd seen at the hospital. Clinical, direct, cutting through bullshit to get to the truth underneath. I've spent 10 years watching people die over things that don't matter. Territory, respect, pride. And you know what every single one of them had in common? They all thought they had more time, thought they could handle just one more conflict, win one more fight, prove one more point, and then they're bleeding out on my table while I'm doing compressions and knowing it's already too late. Volkov was listening, really listening, and even Alexei had stopped his constant scanning of the room. You want those warehouses because they represent power and access and growth, Lena continued. And Adrian won't sell them because doing so would represent weakness and loss and surrender. But neither of you is asking the question that actually matters. Which is, Volkov asked, what are you actually trying to build? Because if it's just more of what you already have, more territory, more money, more people afraid of you, then yeah, this conflict makes sense. Fight until someone wins, someone loses, someone ends up on my table. But if you're trying to build something sustainable, something that lasts beyond the next turf war, then maybe there's a different conversation to have. The table went quiet. Adrian stared at Lena, this woman who'd walked into a meeting with one of the most dangerous men in the city and somehow turned it into a philosophy discussion. You are an interesting woman, Volkov said finally. I see why he keeps you close. I'm not a possession he keeps. I'm a person who chooses to be here. Lena's voice was steel wrapped in courtesy. And I'm choosing to suggest that maybe both of you are smart enough to find a solution that doesn't involve breaking into my apartment or escalating into violence that helps no one. What kind of solution? Alexei asked, speaking for the first time. Lena looked at Adrian. That's up to them. I'm just the person saying there should be one. Adrian felt the weight of everyone's attention shift to him. This was the moment where he could double down, refuse again, let this meeting end the way everyone expected. Or he could do what Lena had been asking him to do since they met. Be different. What if we partnered? The words were out before he'd fully thought them through. Volkov raised an eyebrow. Explain. You need the warehouses for specific shipping access. I need the warehouses for storage and distribution. What if instead of you buying them, we share them? You get your access. I keep ownership. We split operational costs and profits proportionally. You would trust me with access to your property? No. But I'd trust a contract that makes it more expensive for either of us to screw the other than to cooperate. Adrian was thinking out loud now, building the framework as he spoke. We bring in a neutral third party to manage operations, someone neither of us controls. We each put up collateral that gets forfeit if we violate the terms. And we limit the partnership to those 3 warehouses. Everything else stays separate. Volkov sat back, considering. This is not what I expected. It's not what I expected to offer, but it solves your problem without creating more of them. And if I say no, if I insist on ownership, then we're back where we started. Except now you know I'm willing to negotiate, and I know you're willing to threaten people I care about. Neither of those things makes the next conversation easier. Alexei leaned close to his uncle, whispering in Russian. Volkov listened, nodded, then turned back to Adrian. I will consider this, but I have condition, which is the break-in at Ms. Hart's apartment. That was not me. Adrian felt ice in his stomach. What? I said I would consider using her as leverage. I did not say I had already done so. Volkov's face was serious now, all pretense of friendliness gone. Someone broke into her home and left message in my style, yes, but it was not my people, which means either someone is trying to start war between us or you have different enemy than you think. You're lying, Adrian said. I'm many things, but liar about business is not one of them. It's bad for reputation. Volkov pulled out his phone and showed Adrian a screen, security footage timestamp from the night of the break-in. This is my nephew, having dinner with me and 6 others at restaurant in Brighton Beach. All night, many witnesses. And my other key people. I can account for all of them. Adrian looked at the footage, then at Alexei, who nodded confirmation. If it wasn't you, then who? Lena asked. That is a question you should be asking. Volkov stood, buttoning his jacket. I will think about your partnership proposal. It has merit. But first you should find out who is actually threatening your woman. Because in our business, unknown enemies are more dangerous than known ones. He left, Alexei following, and Adrian sat there trying to process what had just happened. If Volkov was telling the truth, and the timestamp suggested he was, then someone else had broken into Lena's apartment. Someone who knew about the conflict with the Russians and had used it as cover. Adrian, Lena said quietly, who else would want to hurt you? The list is longer than I'd like to admit. He pulled out his phone and called Marcus. We have a problem. Volkov says the break-in wasn't him. That's convenient. He has alibis, time-stamped footage. Either he's better at this than I thought, or we've been looking at the wrong enemy. I'll pull the footage from Lena's building, see if we can identify who actually did it. But boss, if it's not the Russians, then it's someone who wants it to look like the Russians, someone who benefits from us going to war. Adrian hung up and looked at Lena, who was processing this new information with the same calm she'd shown throughout the entire meeting. You were amazing, he said. I was honest. There's a difference. You changed the entire direction of that conversation. I just asked questions. You're the one who came up with the solution. Lena finished her coffee, which had gone cold during the meeting. Do you really think a partnership could work? I don't know. Maybe. It's better than the alternatives. Which are? War, surrender, or hoping Volkov gets bored and moves on. Those are terrible alternatives. Welcome to my world. Lena was quiet for a moment, staring at her empty cup. If it wasn't the Russians who broke into my apartment, that means someone else knows about me. About us. Someone who's watching close enough to know it would hurt you. Which is exactly what I didn't want to happen. But it did happen, so now what? Adrian's phone buzzed. Marcus. Got the footage. You need to see this. They met Marcus at the warehouse in Red Hook, where he'd set up a laptop showing security footage from Lena's building. The quality was grainy, but good enough to see a figure in dark clothes and a baseball cap entering through a service door at 2:17 a.m. How'd they get past the lock? Adrian asked. Keycard. Building uses electronic access, and they had a valid card. Marcus fast-forwarded to the figure leaving 20 minutes later. But here's the interesting part. Watch how they move. Adrian watched. The figure walked with confidence, no hesitation, no looking around nervously. This was someone comfortable with breaking and entering, someone who'd done it before. Professional, Adrian said. Very, but not Russian crew. I know how they operate, and this isn't their style. Too clean, too quick. Marcus pulled up another screen. So I started thinking about who else might want to hurt you by threatening her. And I pulled reports from our people watching your other properties. He showed Adrian a series of photos, different locations, different times, but all showing the same thing. People watching, taking notes, following patterns. Someone's been surveilling your entire operation for the past 2 weeks, Marcus said. Not just the warehouses, the clubs, the distribution points, the businesses you own, everything. Who? That's what I can't figure out. They're good at staying hidden, changing appearances, using different vehicles, but they're definitely building a profile. Lena leaned closer to the screen. These pictures, when were they taken? Starting about 3 weeks ago, right around the time... Marcus stopped, looking at Adrian. Right around the time I met Lena, Adrian finished. Someone's been watching since the beginning. Not the Russians, though. Their style is different. This is more methodical, more patient. Marcus pulled up one more photo, this one showing a figure outside Morrison Memorial. And they're not just watching you, they're watching her too. Adrian felt rage building in his chest, the old familiar anger that solved problems with violence. But then he felt Lena's hand on his arm and remembered her words from earlier. Be different, be better. Can you identify any of them? He asked Marcus. Working on it. But whoever's running this operation knows how to avoid cameras and witnesses. It's sophisticated. More sophisticated than street-level crew. Way more. Adrian thought about the pieces. The break-in styled to look Russian, the surveillance that started before the conflict with Volkov, the professional execution of everything. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. Someone's trying to provoke a war, he said. Get me and Volkov fighting each other while they, what, move into the territory we destroy? Or they want something else entirely and we're just collateral damage. Marcus closed the laptop. Either way, we need to find them before they escalate. And we need to keep Lena safe. Already on it. I've upgraded her security, added more cameras, got people watching 24/7. But boss, if whoever this is really wanted to hurt her, they've had opportunities. The break-in was a message, not an attempt. They're trying to manipulate you. It's working. Lena had been quiet, listening, and now she spoke. Can I say something? Of course, Adrian said. This whole thing, the surveillance, the break-in, trying to start a war between you and Volkov, it's all about control. Whoever's doing this wants you reactive instead of strategic, wants you making decisions based on fear instead of logic. She looked at Adrian. So don't give them what they want. What do I give them instead? Nothing? You keep living your life, keep running your business, keep seeing me. You show them that their manipulation doesn't work. And meanwhile, you quietly figure out who they are and what they actually want. Marcus was nodding. She's right. We've been so focused on reacting that we haven't stopped to think about motive. Who benefits from you being distracted? Who gains if you go to war with the Russians? Adrian thought about his empire, about the delicate balance of power that kept everything running. He had competitors, sure, but most of them knew better than to move against him directly. Unless someone new had entered the game. Someone who didn't know the rules yet. Start looking at recent arrivals, he told Marcus. Anyone who's come into the city in the past month with the resources to run an operation like this, cross-reference with people who'd benefit from instability in our territories. On it, Marcus headed for the door, then paused. And boss, the partnership idea with Volkov? It's actually not bad. Might want to pursue that regardless of who's behind this. After he left, Adrian turned to Lena. You should stay with me for a few days, just until we know more. That's not necessary. It is to me. He moved closer to her. I know you don't like feeling protected or controlled, and I'm not trying to do either. But having you somewhere I know is secure would let me focus on finding these people instead of worrying every second that something's happening to you. Lena considered this. A few days. But I'm not hiding, and I'm not stopping my life. I still go to work, still live normally. Deal. They went back to Adrian's apartment, and Lena stood in the middle of his expensive, minimalist living room, looking completely out of place and somehow perfectly right. This is very you, she said. Meaning, expensive, controlled, not a single personal item in sight. She walked to the window overlooking the river. It's like a hotel room. Nice, but nobody actually lives here. I live here. Do you? Or do you just sleep here between running your empire? Adrian realized she was right. He couldn't remember the last time he'd actually spent time in this apartment doing anything besides sleeping or making calls. It was a place to exist between the parts of his life that mattered. What would make it feel more like living? He asked. I don't know. Photos? Books you actually read instead of decorator-chosen ones? Evidence that a human with interests in history and personality exists in this space? I have interests. Name 3 things you do that aren't related to your business. Adrian opened his mouth, then closed it. He used to have interests, used to play basketball, used to read mysteries, used to cook elaborate meals on Sundays because his father had done the same. But somewhere along the way, everything had become about the empire, about survival and power and control. I can't, he finally admitted. That's sad, Adrian. I know. Lena turned from the window. Then let's change it, starting now. What's something you used to love doing before everything became about work? Cooking. My father and I used to cook together every Sunday, big Italian meals that took all day. Then let's cook something. Now? Why not? I'm supposed to be staying here anyway. Might as well make it feel less like a hostage situation and more like a choice. They went to the kitchen, which was state-of-the-art and barely used, and Adrian realized he couldn't remember what ingredients he even had. Lena opened the fridge and laughed. You have condiments, expired milk, and what I think used to be vegetables. She pulled out her phone. We're ordering groceries. An hour later, they had ingredients for carbonara, real carbonara, the kind Tony had taught Adrian to make, and they worked side by side in the kitchen. Lena chopped garlic while Adrian cooked pasta, and they moved around each other with surprising ease. You're good at this, she said. Muscle memory. Used to make this every week. Why'd you stop? Didn't seem worth it just for me. And now? Adrian looked at her, standing in his kitchen wearing his spare shirt, because she hadn't brought a change of clothes, chopping garlic like she belonged there, and felt something shift in his chest. Now it seems worth it. They ate at his dining table that had never been used for actual dining, and Adrian realized this was the first real meal he'd had in his own home in maybe 5 years. Lena told him about her worst shift ever, 3 traumas in 4 hours, not enough hands to help, doing CPR until her arms went numb. He told her about learning to cook from his father, how those Sunday meals were the only time his dad wasn't worried about business or threats or competition. He sounds like he was complicated, Lena said. He was. Loved hard, trusted wrong, paid for it with everything. And you're determined not to make his mistakes. Yeah. Even if it means making different ones? Adrian set down his fork. What do you mean? Your father trusted too much. You don't trust at all. Both strategies have costs. He lost his freedom and eventually his life. You're losing the ability to actually live one. Lena reached across the table and took his hand. I'm not saying you should be like him, but maybe there's a middle ground between trusting everyone and trusting no one. I trust you. Do you, or are you just trying to? It was a fair question. Adrian had told himself he trusted Lena, but every decision he'd made had been about protecting her, controlling the situation, managing the risk. He'd included her in the meeting with Volkov, but only after trying to exclude her. He'd told her about the threats, but only after they'd already escalated. He was trying to be better, but better still meant controlling everything. I want to trust you, he said honestly, but I don't know how to do that without being terrified that something will happen to you because of me. That's not trust, Adrian. That's responsibility. Trust would be believing I can handle whatever comes and supporting me through it instead of trying to prevent it. What if I can't prevent it and you get hurt? Then I get hurt and we deal with it together. That's how this works. Adrian thought about that, about sharing the weight instead of carrying it alone, about letting Lena be a partner instead of something precious he had to protect. It went against every instinct he'd developed over the past decade. But sitting across from her in his empty apartment that suddenly felt less empty, eating a meal they'd made together while discussing the reality of his world without flinching, Adrian realized maybe his instincts had been keeping him safe, but also keeping him alone. I'm going to mess this up, he said. Probably, but I'll call you on it when you do, and you'll try to do better next time. That's how people learn. You make it sound simple. It is simple, it's just not easy. They finished dinner and did dishes together, and Adrian's phone stayed silent for the first time in recent memory. Marcus was handling the investigation, the security was in place, and for a few hours, Adrian let himself exist in this moment instead of constantly strategizing the next one. Later, lying in bed with Lena curled against his side, Adrian stared at the ceiling and thought about trust, about partnership, about becoming someone who deserved what he was being offered instead of someone who just took it. Thank you, he said into the darkness. For what? For not running, for asking hard questions, for being here when every rational part of your brain should have told you to leave weeks ago. Who says my rational brain doesn't want to leave? Lena's voice was soft, sleepy. Maybe I'm just listening to a different part. Which part? The part that spent 10 years being careful and safe and doing everything right and ended up alone in an apartment with a dented Honda and nobody to cook dinner with. The part that looked at you and saw someone who might actually be worth the risk. Adrian pulled her closer. I want to be worth it. Then keep trying. That's all anyone can do. She fell asleep first, her breathing evening out, and Adrian lay awake thinking about everything that had happened. The partnership offer to Volkov that might actually work. The unknown enemy surveilling them both. The choice Lena had made to stay despite every rational reason to run. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Marcus. Found something. Meet me at the warehouse in the morning. You're going to want to see this. Adrian looked at the message, then at Lena sleeping peacefully beside him, and made a decision. Whatever Marcus had found, whoever was behind the threats, Adrian would handle it. But he'd handle it the way Lena had asked him to, strategically, not reactively. Building solutions instead of burning everything down. He was done being the man his father's mistakes had created. It was time to become the man Lena Hart believed he could be, even if he had no idea what that looked like yet. Marcus had coffee waiting when Adrian arrived at the warehouse the next morning. Strong, black, the kind that tasted like punishment but delivered results. Lena had kissed him goodbye at the apartment, heading to work with two of his people following at a discreet distance, and Adrian had promised to text her when he knew more. "You look different," Marcus said, handing him the cup. "Different how?" "Less like you're about to murder someone. More like you actually slept." "I did sleep. When's the last time that happened without whiskey?" Adrian didn't have an answer for that. He took the coffee and followed Marcus to the laptop setup, where multiple screens showed surveillance footage and documents. "So what did you find?" Adrian asked. Marcus pulled up a photo, grainy but clear enough to show a man in his 40s, average build, expensive suit, talking on a phone outside one of Adrian's clubs. This guy's been showing up at 6 different locations over the past 3 weeks. Never stays long, always watching, always on the phone. Marcus clicked through more photos. Facial recognition got a hit. Name's Robert Chen, businessman out of Seattle, legitimate on the surface. Owns import-export companies, real estate, some tech investments. Why is a legitimate businessman surveilling my operation? That's what I couldn't figure out until I dug deeper. Marcus pulled up financial records. Chen's been making moves into the East Coast market for the past year. Quiet moves, buying up property, establishing connections, building infrastructure. And 3 months ago, he approached the Volkov organization about a partnership. Adrian felt pieces clicking into place. They turned him down. They did. Volkov's old school, doesn't trust outsiders, especially ones who come in acting like they own the place. So Chen gets rejected by the Russians and starts looking at other opportunities. Marcus showed him more documents. He's been researching you specifically, your properties, your connections, your history, everything. And he figures if he can't partner with Volkov, he'll provoke a war between us and move in while we're destroying each other. Exactly. The break-in at Lena's apartment, the surveillance, all of it designed to make you paranoid and reactive. He's betting that you'll either go after Volkov and create a power vacuum, or you'll be so distracted protecting her that you won't notice him making moves on your territory. Adrian stared at the photo of Robert Chen, this stranger who'd decided to use Lena as a pawn in a game she'd never agreed to play. The old Adrian would have already been planning violence, finding where Chen stayed, sending a message that couldn't be misunderstood. But Lena's voice was in his head, asking him to be different. "What's his weakness?" Adrian asked. Marcus looked surprised. I'm not going to kill a legitimate businessman and prove that I'm exactly what everyone thinks I am. I'm going to be smarter than that." Adrian sat down, thinking. Chen's playing this game because he thinks he understands the rules. He thinks we operate on violence and intimidation. What if we don't give him that? What are you thinking? He's legitimate on paper, right? Real businesses, legal operations, everything documented and taxed and above board? Mostly. There's probably some gray area, but nothing prosecutable that I could find. Then that's his weakness. He's built something that depends on staying legitimate. He can't afford the kind of attention that comes with actual criminal charges. Adrian pulled out his phone. "I need you to do something for me. Find every piece of documentation on Chen's operations. Business licenses, tax records, import manifests, everything. And I need David to go through it all with the kind of scrutiny that finds problems." Marcus was catching on. "You're going legal. I'm going smart. Chen wants to play in our world. He's going to learn that we don't just operate on violence. We operate on leverage." Adrian stood. "And then I need you to set up a meeting. Me, Chen, and Volkov. All 3 of us, neutral territory." "That's risky. Everything worth doing is." Adrian finished his coffee. "But before any of that, I need to talk to someone." He called Richard, his lawyer, the man who'd kept Adrian out of prison more times than either of them wanted to count. Richard answered on the second ring, sounding irritated because Adrian always called at inconvenient times. "Please tell me you're not about to confess to something," Richard said. "I need to know how to destroy someone legally." "That's a new one. Usually you just destroy them. I'm trying something different. There's a businessman named Robert Chen, legitimate operations, probably some corners cut, but nothing obvious. I need to know how to make his life difficult using actual laws and regulations." Richard was quiet for a moment. "You feeling okay? This doesn't sound like you." "I'm feeling like maybe there's a better way to solve problems than the way I've always done it. Help me or don't, but stop questioning my sanity." "Fine. Give me the details." Adrian spent the next hour on the phone with Richard, going through everything Marcus had found on Chen's operations. The lawyer asked questions, took notes, and occasionally made sounds that suggested he was finding interesting things. "Okay," Richard finally said. "Here's what I've got. Chen's import licenses have some irregularities, nothing criminal on its own, but enough that if someone filed complaints with the right regulatory agencies, he'd be tied up in audits and investigations for months. His real estate holdings include a few properties that might have zoning violations. Again, nothing major, but expensive and time-consuming to resolve. And his tech investments, there's at least one company that's probably violating securities regulations with how they're reporting earnings. Can you make that happen? The complaints, the audits, all of it? I can make it happen in a way that looks organic. Anonymous tips, concerned citizens, routine enforcement. It won't destroy him, but it'll make doing business on the East Coast expensive and complicated enough that he'll probably go back to Seattle. Do it. And Richard, make sure it's clean. I don't want anything traced back to me or my operations. That'll cost extra. Bill me." After he hung up, Marcus was watching him with something like respect. "You really are trying to be different. I'm trying to be someone worth trusting. That means not jumping to violence every time someone threatens what's mine. And if the legal route doesn't work, then we'll revisit our options. But I want to try this first." Adrian checked his phone, a text from Lena asking how it was going. He sent back a brief update, nothing that would worry her, and felt the weight of her trust settling on his shoulders like armor. The meeting with Chen and Volkov took 3 days to arrange. 3 days of Richard filing complaints and triggering investigations. 3 days of Chen's businesses suddenly facing regulatory scrutiny from 6 different agencies. 3 days of pressure building until Chen agreed to sit down. They met at the same cafe where Adrian had met Volkov, neutral territory, public enough to discourage violence, but private enough for honest conversation. Adrian arrived first, Volkov second, and Chen last, looking frustrated and confused in equal measure. "Gentlemen," Chen said, sitting down without invitation, "I appreciate the meeting, though I'm not sure why we're all here." He was good. Adrian had to give him that. Playing innocent, acting like he didn't know exactly why his entire operation had suddenly become the focus of regulatory attention. "We're here," Volkov said, his accent thicker than usual, "because someone has been playing games. And in my experience, games only work when the players don't talk to each other." Chen's expression didn't change, but Adrian saw the calculation in his eyes. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Then let me clarify." Adrian pulled out his phone and showed Chen the surveillance photos. "You've been watching my operations for 3 weeks. You broke into my girlfriend's apartment to send a message. You've been trying to provoke a conflict between me and Mr. Volkov so you could move into territory while we were distracted." "That's quite an accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's a fact." Adrian put his phone away. "The question is what we do about it." Chen looked between them, and Adrian watched him realize that his strategy had backfired. Instead of turning enemies against each other, he'd united them. "What do you want?" Chen asked. "I want you to leave," Adrian said simply. "Pack up your East Coast operations, go back to Seattle, and don't come back." "And if I refuse? Then the regulatory problems you've been having for the past 3 days will look like a vacation compared to what comes next." Adrian leaned forward. "I've got lawyers who can tie you up in investigations for years. I've got connections and agencies who would love to make an example of an outsider trying to move in. And Mr. Volkov here has his own methods of making business difficult." Volkov nodded. "Very difficult. But here's the thing," Adrian continued. "I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to waste time and resources destroying you when I could just as easily let you walk away. So I'm offering you a choice. Leave on your own terms or be forced out on ours." Chen sat back, processing. "You're serious about this?" "Completely. And what's to stop me from just trying again in a few months? Different approach? Different strategy?" "Nothing," Adrian admitted. "Except the next time I won't offer you a choice. Next time I'll make sure you understand that this city isn't a game board for outsiders who think they're smarter than the people who built it." "That sounds like a threat." "It's a promise. One I'd rather not have to keep." Adrian pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. "Inside is documentation of every regulatory violation, every questionable business practice, every corner you've cut in the past year. None of it's criminal on its own, but all of it together paints a picture of someone who shouldn't be doing business anywhere, much less trying to expand into new markets. Chen opened the envelope, scanned the contents, and his face went pale. How did you... Because I'm better at this than you are. And unlike you, I actually understand how this world works. Adrian stood. You've got 72 hours to be out of the city. After that, this documentation goes to every agency that might be interested, along with enough pressure to make sure they actually investigate. And my properties? My investments? Sell them or keep them, I don't care. Just manage them from Seattle. You can make money in this city without trying to take mine. Learn that lesson or don't. But don't test me on this. Volkov stood as well. Is good offer. I would take it if I were you. Chen looked between them, and Adrian could see him weighing his options. Pride versus pragmatism. The desire to fight back versus the reality of what fighting back would cost. Fine, Chen finally said. I'll leave. But this isn't over. Yes, it is, Adrian's voice was firm. Because if it's not, if you come back or try something else, or even think about approaching my people or my city, you won't be dealing with lawyers and regulations. You'll be dealing with exactly what you thought you'd provoke between me and Volkov. And trust me, you don't want that. They left Chen sitting at the table, and outside on the street, Volkov turned to Adrian. That was well done. Using law instead of violence. Smart. I'm trying to be smarter about everything. Because of the woman. Because of a lot of things. But yeah, she's a big part of it. Volkov nodded slowly. You still want to discuss partnership for the warehouses? I do. I think it could work for both of us. Then we talk details. Tomorrow, my office. Bring your lawyer. Volkov extended his hand. And Adrian? Thank you for not making me have war. It's expensive and messy, and I'm getting too old for it. You and me both. They shook hands, and Adrian watched Volkov walk away, feeling like he'd just navigated something far more dangerous than any fight. He'd chosen strategy over violence, partnership over conflict, and somehow it had worked. His phone rang. Marcus. Chen just left the cafe. Looked like someone kicked his dog. Good. Make sure he actually leaves the city. If he's still here in 73 hours, we move to Plan B. What's Plan B? I don't know yet, but I'll come up with something that doesn't involve bodies in the river. You really have changed. I'm trying to. Adrian started walking toward Morrison Memorial. How's security on Lena? Solid. No incidents, no suspicious activity. Whoever was watching seems to have backed off once Chen knew we were onto him. Keep it up anyway. At least until we're sure this is actually over. He hung up and kept walking, and 20 minutes later he was standing outside the hospital watching people come and go. Ambulances bringing emergencies, families bringing worry, staff bringing whatever strength they had left after long shifts. This was Lena's world, not power or territory or empires built on fear, but showing up for people in their worst moments and helping them through it. She'd asked him to be different, to be better. And for the first time in his life, Adrian had actually tried to be both. Lena came out at shift change, looking exhausted but intact, and she spotted him immediately. You're here, she said, surprised. Wanted to see you, walk you home. I have security following me. I know, but I wanted to do it myself. Adrian fell into step beside her. Is that okay? It's more than okay. She took his hand. How'd it go with the mysterious enemy? Solved. Legally, surprisingly. Turns out threatening someone with audits and investigations works almost as well as threatening them with violence. Lena stopped walking and turned to look at him. You're serious? Completely. Met with him and Volkov, laid out the situation, gave him an exit that didn't involve anyone getting hurt. He's leaving the city. Adrian Vale solved a problem without violence. I should mark this day on a calendar. Don't get too excited. I'm still capable of violence when it's necessary. I just decided it wasn't necessary this time. They walked in silence for a while, and Adrian realized he was nervous. He'd handled a legitimate threat using legitimate means, proven to himself and to Lena that he could be different when it mattered. But there was still the question of what came next, whether this thing between them could actually work long-term, or if it was just a temporary break from the reality of who he was. Can I ask you something? Lena said. Anything. What do you want? Not with the empire or the business or any of that. What do you actually want for yourself? Adrian thought about it, really thought about it, instead of giving the automatic answer about power and security and staying on top. I want to cook dinner on Sundays, he finally said. I want to have someone to come home to who isn't afraid of me. I want to build something that lasts without constantly wondering who's going to try to take it away. I want... He paused, surprised by the truth of what he was about to say. I want what I had for a few hours in my apartment with you. Making carbonara, talking about real things, being a person instead of a strategy. That sounds nice. It does. But I don't know if it's possible. Not with what I am. Lena stopped walking again, right there on the sidewalk with people flowing around them. Here's what I think. I think you're so used to being what your empire needs you to be that you've forgotten you get to choose who you are. Yeah, you run a criminal organization. Yeah, you make decisions that hurt people. But you also just solved a major problem without violence. You also cook carbonara and send orchids and show up outside hospitals because you want to walk someone home. Those things don't cancel each other out. No, they don't. But they also don't have to be in opposition. You can be both the man who protects his territory and the man who tries to protect it smarter. You can be both the person people fear and the person someone trusts. She took his other hand so she was holding both. The question isn't whether it's possible. The question is whether you want it enough to keep trying. I do, Adrian said. I want this, you, whatever this could be. Then let's figure it out. But we're figuring it out as partners, not as you trying to protect me from your world while also living in it. I need you to actually let me in. I'm scared of what that looks like. So am I. But I'm more scared of not trying. Adrian kissed her right there on the street, not caring who saw, not worried about vulnerability or weakness or any of the things that had governed his life for the past decade. When they broke apart, Lena was smiling. So what now? She asked. Now I take you home, make sure you're safe, and then I go negotiate a partnership with a Russian crime boss that might actually work. That's romantic. I'll make it up to you. Dinner this weekend? Marcello's again? I'd like that. They walked back to her apartment, and Adrian's security team stayed discreet while he walked her to her door. Inside, everything looked normal. Marcus had made sure the place was cleaned and secured after the break-in, and there was no trace of what had happened. I should get used to this, Lena said, looking around. The security, the awareness, all of it. I wish you didn't have to. I wish a lot of things. But this is reality, and I'd rather face it with you than avoid it alone. She turned to him. Are you staying? Do you want me to? I want you to do what feels right instead of what you think you should do. Adrian thought about that, about the difference between obligation and choice. I'll stay, but I need to take some calls, handle some business. Is that okay? It's your life. I'm not asking you to stop living it. I'm just asking to be part of it. They ordered takeout and Adrian worked from her couch, making calls about the Volkov partnership, while Lena caught up on sleep she'd missed during her double shift. It felt domestic in a way Adrian's life had never felt before. Normal, comfortable. Like this was something that could actually exist beyond the crisis that had brought them together. The partnership with Volkov took 2 weeks to finalize. Contracts, negotiations, lawyers arguing about percentages and responsibilities, and what happened if either party violated the terms. In the end, they settled on a 60-40 split in Adrian's favor for the warehouses, with Volkov's organization getting dedicated access for their legitimate shipping operations and both sides sharing the costs and profits from the storage business. This is historic, Richard said after both sides signed. I don't think I've ever seen two organizations actually partner instead of going to war. Times change, Adrian said. People change. You've certainly changed. A few months ago, you would have burned those warehouses down before sharing them. A few months ago, I didn't have a reason to try being different. The partnership started smoothly. Volkov's crew handled shipping logistics, Adrian's people managed storage and distribution, and the neutral third-party manager kept everything running without favoring either side. It wasn't perfect. There were disputes about space allocation and scheduling, but they resolved them through conversation instead of violence. Chen left the city on the second day of his 72-hour deadline. Marcus confirmed that he'd sold most of his East Coast properties at a loss and returned to Seattle, and the regulatory investigations quietly disappeared once he was gone. Adrian kept the documentation anyway. Insurance against Chen deciding to try again. Life settled into something resembling normal, if normal could include running a criminal empire while dating a trauma nurse. Adrian and Lena found a rhythm. Dinners when their schedules aligned, texts throughout the day, nights at either his apartment or hers, depending on where felt right. She met Marcus properly, and while the meeting was awkward at first, they eventually bonded over their shared frustration with Adrian's tendency to make unilateral decisions. "I've been telling him for years that he needs to trust people more," Marcus said. "How's that been working out?" Lena asked. "Not great, but you seem to be having better luck." 3 months after the night at the Sapphire Den, Adrian took Lena back to Marcello's. Tony hugged them both like family and disappeared into the kitchen without taking their order, emerging with dishes that represented every region of Italy and probably violated several health codes about portion size. "He's trying to fatten us up," Lena said, laughing. "He does this. It's his love language." They ate and talked, and Adrian realized that this exact moment, sitting in a corner booth with red sauce on his shirt and Lena laughing at something Tony had said in rapid Italian, this was what he'd been missing. Not power or control or empire, but connection, belonging, being known by someone who saw all of him and chose to stay anyway. "I love you," he said, the words surprising him as much as her. Lena set down her fork. "What?" "I love you. I know it's fast and probably complicated and maybe not what you want to hear, but it's true. And I'm trying to be honest, so there it is." She was quiet for a moment, and Adrian felt panic rising. Too much, too soon, he'd pushed too hard like he always did. "I love you too," Lena finally said. "And you're right. It's fast and complicated and probably a terrible idea, but it's also true." "Yeah?" "Yeah." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm not saying it's going to be easy. You're still going to make decisions I disagree with, and I'm still going to call you on them. You're still going to be who you are, and I'm still going to be who I am. But we can figure it out. We've been figuring it out, and we'll keep figuring it out. That's what this is. Constant figuring, constant choosing each other, even when it's hard." Tony appeared with dessert, took one look at them holding hands across the table, and smiled knowingly before disappearing again. "He ships us," Lena said. "He's been shipping us since the first time we came here. Kept asking when I was going to stop being stupid and tell you how I felt." "Smart man." They finished dessert and walked out into the night, and Adrian realized that this city he'd spent years conquering looked different now. Less like territory to protect, and more like a place he actually lived. The streets weren't just routes between properties and meetings. They were places where he held Lena's hand while she told him about her day, where they stopped for bad coffee because the bodega owner knew her order, where life happened outside of the empire. 6 months after that first night, Adrian made another decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He started divesting. Not completely, he wasn't stupid enough to give up everything he'd built, but he started selling off the more questionable operations, the ones that required constant violence to maintain, the ones that made him the person Lena had asked him not to be. He kept the Sapphire Den and the legitimate businesses, kept the partnership with Volkov, kept enough to maintain influence and security, but he let go of the rest. Marcus thought he was crazy. Richard thought he was brilliant. Volkov told him he was either very wise or very stupid, and time would tell which. Lena just held him when he came home stressed from another negotiation, another sale, another piece of his old life being dismantled. "You okay?" she asked one night after a particularly difficult day. "I don't know. I spent 20 years building this empire, and now I'm taking it apart piece by piece. What if I'm wrong? What if I need all of it and I'm just being naive?" "What if you don't need it?" Lena countered. "What if you've been carrying weight that was never necessary, just familiar? Then I've wasted a lot of years. Or you learned what you needed to learn, and now you're choosing something different. That's not waste, Adrian, that's growth." He thought about that, about growth versus waste, about choosing versus defaulting. His father had defaulted into the life because it was what he knew. Adrian had chosen it because he thought it was the only way to survive. But maybe survival didn't have to look like fear. A year after meeting Lena, Adrian walked into Morrison Memorial carrying flowers. Not the orchid, which was still alive in her locker, but a bouquet of peonies because he remembered they were her favorite. He found her in the ICU break room, finishing paperwork at the end of her shift. "Hey," he said. She looked up, saw the flowers, and smiled. "What's the occasion?" "1 year since you refused me at the Sapphire Den and changed everything." "I didn't change anything. I just asked you to be honest." "Same thing." Adrian set the flowers down and pulled out a small box from his pocket. "I have a question." Lena's eyes went wide. "Adrian, it's not what you think." "Well, it is, but not right now. Later. This is something else." He opened the box to reveal a key. "Move in with me. Not because it's safer or more secure or any of those reasons, but because I want to come home to you, want to cook Sunday dinners together, want to keep figuring this out in the same space instead of across 2 apartments." Lena took the key, turning it over in her hands. "Your place or mine?" "Mine. Bigger kitchen, better for cooking, but we can make it actually feel like someone lives there instead of a hotel room." "Photos? Books? Evidence of personality?" "All of it. Whatever makes it ours instead of just mine." She kissed him, and Adrian felt something settle in his chest that had been restless his entire life. This was right. Not perfect, not without complications, but right. "Yes," Lena said. "I'll move in. But you're helping carry boxes, and we're getting rid of at least half your expensive furniture that nobody actually sits on." "Deal." They walked out of the hospital together, and Adrian thought about the path that had led here. The night he'd approached a woman who didn't care about his power. The choice to be honest instead of strategic. The decision to solve problems differently. The constant work of being someone worth trusting instead of just someone to be feared. It wasn't a straight line from who he'd been to who he was becoming. There were setbacks and mistakes and days when the old Adrian wanted to solve everything with force and intimidation. But Lena was there for those days, calling him on his bullshit and reminding him that he'd chosen differently for a reason. Marcus noticed the changes too. "You're happier," he said one day. "Lighter." "I'm divesting a criminal empire and trying to be a better person. Should be heavier." "Nah, weight isn't about what you carry. It's about whether you're carrying it alone." Marcus paused. "I'm glad you found her. Glad you listened when she asked you to be different." "Me too." The empire kept running, smaller but more sustainable. The partnership with Volkov expanded into other legitimate ventures. Real estate development, legal import-export, even a restaurant that Tony helped them launch. Adrian learned that power didn't have to mean fear. That influence could be built on respect and reliability instead of threat. He still had enemies, still made hard choices, still operated in a world that wasn't entirely legal or entirely safe. But he did it differently now, with Lena beside him reminding him that who he was didn't have to be all he could be. 2 years after that first night at the Sapphire Den, Adrian proposed properly. Not in a hospital break room or during a crisis, but on the pier where they'd sat watching the river flow past. The same bench, the same view. But everything else was different. "I know I'm not perfect," he said, holding the ring. "I know I'm going to make mistakes and struggle with trust and probably revert to old habits when things get hard. But I also know that I'm a better person with you than I am without you. And I want to keep being better, keep choosing to be someone who deserves what we have. So will you marry me?" Lena looked at the ring, then at him, and Adrian saw everything in her eyes, love and concern and hope and fear all mixed together. "Yes," she said, "but we're doing this as partners. You don't get to make unilateral decisions about our life just because you're used to running an empire." "I can work with that. And we're keeping our own bank accounts. I love you, but I'm not naive about where your money comes from." "Fair. And if you ever lie to me about something important, if you ever go back to being the person who solves everything with fear, we're done. I'm not sticking around for that version of you." "I understand." "Okay then." She held out her hand. "Let's do this." He slipped the ring on her finger, and they sat on that bench watching the city lights reflect off the water, 2 people who'd found each other in the least likely way and built something real out of the wreckage of who they'd been. The wedding was small. Tony's restaurant, close friends, Marcus as best man looking uncomfortable in a tux. Volkov sent flowers and a card that said, "Congratulations on finding something worth more than territory." Lena wore a simple dress from a department store because she refused to spend thousands on something she'd wear once, and Adrian wore a suit that actually fit instead of armor. When the officiant asked if he took Lena Hart to be his wife, Adrian thought about everything that had led to this moment. The woman who'd said no and meant it. The choice to be honest instead of powerful. The slow, difficult work of becoming someone new while still being fundamentally himself. "I do," he said. And when Lena said the same, Adrian felt something he'd never expected to feel in his life. He felt like he'd won something that actually mattered. Years would pass. The empire would continue to shrink as Adrian divested more operations, keeping only the legitimate businesses and a few gray area ventures he couldn't quite let go of. Volkov would eventually retire and hand his organization to Alexei, who proved surprisingly adept at maintaining the partnership. Marcus would finally take a vacation and come back refreshed enough to joke that maybe Adrian had been onto something with this work-life balance thing. And Lena would keep working at Morrison Memorial, showing up for people in their worst moments, coming home to Adrian exhausted and renewed in equal measure. They'd fight about his decisions and her stubbornness. They'd cook Sunday dinners and host people at their apartment that finally looked lived in. They'd navigate the complicated reality of loving someone while also being who they were. But standing there in Tony's restaurant, watching Lena smile at him with love and exasperation and hope, Adrian understood something fundamental. Power wasn't about controlling everything. It was about choosing what mattered and protecting it without losing yourself in the process. Fear kept you safe, but love made you brave enough to risk safety for something better. And sometimes, the strongest thing you could do was let someone see you completely and trust them not to destroy what they found. Adrian Vale had built an empire on being the most dangerous person in the room, but Lena Hart had shown him that the real danger was in never letting anyone close enough to matter. He'd spent his life avoiding his father's mistakes, building walls, trusting no one, surviving on fear and strategy and control. And then a woman in a nightclub had said no to him, and everything had changed. Not because she'd fixed him or saved him or any of those romantic notions that reduced people to projects, but because she'd asked him to be honest and then stuck around when honesty revealed someone complicated and flawed and trying. Because she'd shown him that being worth trusting was harder and more valuable than being worth fearing. Because she'd chosen him and kept choosing him, even when the easy thing would have been to walk away. And Adrian had chosen her back, every day, through every crisis and calm, through every moment where his old instincts screamed to control everything and her voice reminded him that control was just fear in disguise. They danced at their wedding, surrounded by the strange collection of people who made up their lives, criminals and nurses and lawyers, and Tony crying in the corner because he'd always been a romantic. And when the music slowed and Lena rested her head on Adrian's shoulder, she whispered something only he could hear. "I'm proud of you, for becoming this, for trying." "I'm still trying," he said, "going to keep trying." "I know, that's what I love about you. You're never finished becoming." Neither of them were finished. They'd keep making mistakes and fixing them, keep navigating the space between who they'd been and who they wanted to be. Keep choosing each other even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. But standing there in Tony's restaurant with Lena in his arms, and a future spreading out before them like the city lights on the river, Adrian felt something he'd never expected. He felt like he'd finally come home, not to a place or a position or an empire, but to a person who saw him completely and loved him anyway. And that, Adrian realized, was the only kind of power that actually lasted.